14th, 2023 school board meeting. Do I have a motion to establish the agenda as published, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Deborah. All in favor? Students, please.
Aye.
And directors? Aye. Against? And with that, we've got our agenda 2050. Let's move to recognitions. Brad, please take it away.
Great, thank you. We have a number of recognitions to bring forth tonight, but the first order of business that we need to do is we need to swear in Ava as our new junior student board representative. So Ava, come on right up here. You're good. Okay. I, Ava Zane,
I, Ava Zane,
having been selected to be a student representative on the board of directors of the Mercer Island School District,
having been selected to be a student representative on the board of directors of the Mercer Island School District,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties and responsibilities of this office
that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties and responsibilities of this office
and as prescribed by board policy and procedure 1250.
and as prescribed by board policy and procedure 1250.
Congratulations. All right, well, Asha, you have your counterpart.
Yeah.
Not that you haven't already been working very hard throughout the summer to get ready. So would like to recognize a number of students, and we're doing some catch up from last spring when some of our students were still competing and coming forward. So I'm going to bring students forward to talk about several of you, but just starting tonight is that 5 of these 6 students who we'll see tonight won awards in the New York Times 6th Annual Student Podcast Contest. And the 6th student won an award in the National Public Radio Student Podcast Challenge. So we're going to start with our New York Times. The New York Times podcast, they received 1,100 submissions from high schoolers all across our country. The large number of these submissions were whittled down to 11 winners, 3 of which were Mercer Island High School submissions, and the Times also chose 14 honorable mentions, and 1 of our students was an honorable mention award winner. So let's start with Mag Jr. Maggie, is it Blum? Come on up. We're going to start with you. You get to start at the podium. So Maggie, your podcast, The 2 Milligram Murderer, pulled no punches and shares the real impact of fentanyl with interviews from a pediatrician, the DEA, and sadly, a mom. You want to talk a little bit about your podcast and what you hope it continues to do?
Yeah, first of all, sorry I'm in my soccer uniform. I have a bus in like 20 minutes to go to Hazen. So I was sitting in class with Joe and Natalie. I sat right by their desk last year. I had the first period and I always knew I wanted to do a New York Times submission. And last fall was when fentanyl was like everywhere. It was the talk everywhere. And I had no clue what was happening. And that scared me and it was interesting. And I thought, why not dig into it? And because Joe, I remember, this is really random, but I remember when I was an intro student, Joe said to us, he goes, you guys have the greatest power ever. If someone gets an email from a student wanting to do something with radio, they're gonna respond. And so I thought I'd jump at that. And I didn't think emailing the DEA, just general email address, like the .org email address, I didn't think I'd get a response. I thought I'd go to a spam folder, but like an hour later, I got a response from their liaison, and then it kind of took off from there. And I totally like immersed myself. Like sorry to my mom because I missed a lot of class to edit it, but I'm really happy I did it. And I think this was, so when I found out this summer, I was at work and I just started bawling because this was my first experience where I really worked hard at something and saw all the way through, and it was so awesome to get rewarded for that. And I hope that this project speaks to other people as much as it spoke to me. And I want to continue my work in radio and being a voice for the fentanyl crisis for kids my age. And I think I'm going to do another project this year. I have yet to decide what it is.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Fedora. Been a while, Sam.
It has.
You look great.
A little different since I had you in kindergarten.
That's right. Sam produced a podcast on stage at Woodstock. It discussed Woodstock with three of the legendary musicians who played there. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I mean, in radio, I love music. I love musicians. I love their stories, and throughout all of last year and continuing this year, and hopefully next year, I've been interviewing a lot of musicians from all over, I guess mostly the 20th century, but hopefully I'll expand someday. I guess we'll see. But I got the chance to interview three great musicians who played at Woodstock: Arlo Guthrie, Jorma Kaukonen, and Fito de la Parra. The three of them, yeah, they played. Arlo played as himself. Jorma played with Jefferson Airplane, and Fito played with Canned Heat. And the three of them just have really interesting stories about the festival, because Woodstock, I guess, is probably one of the most famous musical moments in our history, but a lot of the stories behind it aren't really told. So I really liked hearing some of their stories in my respective interviews and figured I'd compile them into a little podcast. And apparently it worked. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And Kate Lennington. So Kate collaborated with 23 graduate Ren Novak, and they worked on their winning podcast, Aurora Bridge Spotlight: How a Troll Saved Fremont. And they put together this visionary idea and through the story of the Fremont Troll. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, last year me and Ren did a Friday live together from 8 to 9 every morning on Fridays, and it was always lots of fun. And one day we were just like talking about hockey randomly, and we were talking about how the Kraken's mascot's a troll. And I was like, I wonder why it's a troll. And I looked it up, and I learned that like it was a troll because it was inspired by the Fremont Troll. And that just like, I thought that was really cool. And so then I like looked up a bunch more stuff about the Fremont Troll, and I found that it had a really interesting story. And so then we found the names of like the four main people who worked on it, and we reached out to all of them. And Steve Badames, who is like the main guy who headed the project, got back to us. And he's a architecture professor at UW and at a bunch of other schools. And I got to talk to him, and he just had a lot of really cool stories about that time period, and like how the troll like really helped bring Fremont out of like a lot of issues they were having with drug use and violence in that area, and how they were able to use art to kind of save the area. It was a really great project that me and Ren got to work on.
Congratulations. And Elise McDonald, come on up, Elise. You two are a senior already. Huh?
Yeah.
Last year, Elise put together a podcast, History of Snoqualmie Pass, and she featured her great-grandfather who brought the rope tow to Washington and invented night skiing. Tell us more.
Yeah, so I've known about, like, I've done projects about this over the years, and so finally getting able to put it into something like a creative outlet that I really enjoy radio. And I think not only like the story connects to me, but it also connects like everyone in the area and has a big influence to like the Seattle culture. And so I just thought it would be a cool history to share with everyone that we can all have some sort of connection to.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And moving into our NPR Student Podcast Challenge. This brought together students from the United States, Puerto Rico, and throughout our country. And I'd like to bring forward senior Grace Go to the podium. Grace was the winner of the Best Mental Health Podcast in the NPR Student Podcast Challenge. Her award-winning podcast was titled Discomfort Food, which is part of her own personal story. And so if you'd care to share more, please do.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for making time and space to recognize all of us. It means a lot. My podcast was about my mental health journey and my relationship with food. It wasn't that great growing up, but it's great now, thanks to my wonderful supportive parents. Going into this, I decided that I wanted to submit maybe 2 days before it was actually due. So like most high schoolers, I procrastinated up until the very last minute. But I knew that I was gonna win this. It's not because I'm the best journalist, and by no means am I the best broadcaster. I mean, look at them. But I knew I was gonna win this because we're very fortunate to have the equipment that we do. We have industry grade microphones. We have 2 incredible teachers who have industry experience. And because of them and because of the support of my peers, I've been able to honor all Asian Americans on a national level. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Congratulations. And as Grace mentioned, be remiss not to acknowledge and point out and maybe even bring forward Natalie Woods and Joe Bryant. They work together. Come on forward. They work in tandem, and you know, the radio wasn't that long ago, which was something that we thought about whether or not we should even continue with our high school. And there were several crossroads along the way, and it's so popular now that actually we had to move Natalie from a different position into a teaching role so that we could actually meet the demand of the students who are wanting to get their voice out there through this medium. So just a couple words from the 2 of you, but thank you.
Thank you, and I'll just say quickly, I'm so proud of these guys and all these students who submit stuff, and 3 of these are really capturing living history, which I think is really special, and Grace and Maggie's podcast could literally save lives. I think they need to be heard by everybody in our community and beyond. These eating disorders and you know, the drug pandemic is just something coming from teenagers. I think it's really important that those get amplified. So thank you for doing it a little bit right here. And Natalie is really the one who teaches them this stuff. I teach them to be creative and all that, but it's her journalism background that makes them put these great packages together.
Well, obviously, when we have such outstanding students, it's pretty easy to teach them my ways and the ways of journalism, but storytelling in this format is really challenging. It takes a lot of skill, a lot of creativity, and just knowing how to weave in sound and sound elements with going out and getting interviews and writing a script. It really is challenging, and it's high level, like beyond high school level stuff that even kids going to college have not mastered yet. And it's a testament to how wonderful our students are. And they spent a lot of time outside of the regular school day. This was not part of their regular assignments. They took extra time and care to put these together. And it's super impressive that we didn't just win 1, we won 5 New York Times and an NPR. So kudos to them, they're amazing.
Absolutely. So students, if you would come up with your teachers, we'll do a photo with the board. So you'll just, do you want to actually come in front? We'll have you come right in front.
We lost one to the soccer.
Good.
Hey, you bet. It was a lot of fun.
All right, let's back up sort of a half circle, back up, taller people in the back. And we'll have time for family photos as well too.
I know. How's it looking? Do you need some adjustments?
Squish more. There we go, all right. We'll be on me first, and then we'll do family second, for so eyes on the camera. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you. Family members.
You can come up to the middle. You don't have to be there. You can come right to the middle.
Oh, there you go.
All right, good. Thank you.
Radio programs. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Dean.
All right, so just a couple other recognitions. One is kind of hot off the presses, but this was emailed in just this afternoon that we had a student who's now a middle schooler, but in elementary school at West Mercer, they were doing a Make a Difference project. And this student's Make a Difference project was encouraging and figuring out a way to get recycling of batteries on Mercer Island. Worked with a council member, worked with Recology, and was able to get this. And so we'll have recycle bins here on Mercer Island for batteries coming soon from one of our students from the project. So the others, just mentioning in as we kind of continue through is, you know, tonight we have a football game, and home football games tend to be on Friday nights. And just a happy new year to all of our Jewish friends on the island, with tomorrow being Rosh Hashanah. We moved that event to Thursday to make space for our families and friends who will be celebrating this weekend. And then on the heels, of course, one of the holiest days with Yom Kippur, which is coming up. So we'll take time in my newsletter tomorrow. I take time to recognize both of those, as well as Hispanic Heritage Month. And so September 15th through October 15th is National Hispanic Heritage Month. And you'll see books in libraries and various activities throughout the district as we celebrate some of those as well. So those are our recognitions.
I have a little extra recognition,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, which is I think tonight is the first night that the band is wearing their new uniforms, or at least they're having a recognition for all of the parents who generously donated to fund the new uniforms. So they're marching the parents out to the field together with the band tonight. So thank you to all those parents.
Cheers, thank you. It's at 6:30, right? I think just
Yeah.
here.
We'll hear them, I'm sure, when they go.
We'll hear them soon. And let's move on to the superintendent's report, right?
Thank you. I do want to begin this with the sad news I shared with you as a board, and with our staff and faculty, and maybe some community members have also heard. But our dear friend and colleague Jennifer Wright, who worked from the district from 1993 through 2018, passed away on Monday, or on Tuesday morning rather. It came on fairly quickly, and our hearts and thoughts are with her husband Mike, her son Tracy, who was a graduate of Mercer High School, was in the marching band. But just as I wrote to the staff, just her legacy and impact on this district. There isn't anything we can do as we work throughout each day that doesn't have some impact from her, whether or not it's especially on the technology side. A lot of the fiber cables that are all heading down to the south end were a joint project with the city, Comcast, and the district, and she was on point for that. She had the very first email account in the district, and it wasn't even district produced. She built her own network in her classroom at the high school. She built the very first website for our school district, and after teaching physics and math at the high school, she became our first technology coach. She was a tech-TOSA and a specialist. And as I went back through her file, and I knew the history, but I did want to look, it looks like the district created a lot of jobs for her because of her skill set. But then she was a leader in our district, and as a resident of the island and whatnot, we're going to miss her a lot. We've already missed her here as a staff member, but the passing of her has been tough on staff this week. So, with that, in terms of the report, that I have is one thing that I told you that we would come back with, and we started a conversation with the Long Range Facility Planning Committee on Monday night, because one of the variables that we've been looking at is, how much does it cost for an elementary school when we open the doors each year? And so I wanted to walk us through some of the work that Director Sullivan has been doing, and the two of us will kind of share a little bit about how we came up to some numbers about what it costs for an elementary school each year. I want to begin though with just perspective and some of my own lived experience. When I was a principal prior to coming here in a school district that was growing, just to give you perspective, I arrived in 2001 and I helped open up Elementary 34 as a teacher. And when I left that district in 2009 to come here, they were opening up Elementary 48. Massive tracts of land, massive building, and so all this expansion. And as you're building those schools, it's because you have so many new students who are coming in. And so when I took over Saddle Ranch, we had 850 students as the principal there. And then Stone Mountain opened up. And Stone Mountain opened up near us, and so we lost enrollment for that, brought us down to about 600, and then they continued to grow. And I point that out because when you're doing that, you're hiring a whole new staff. I mean, you're not just shifting staff from one building to another, you're going out and looking for those. And so I put that up against going back in time a little bit to Northwood. And when we opened Northwood, a little different situation than my experience in Colorado. When Northwood opened, it wasn't because there was some big tract of land. We'd love to have a new tract of land. But instead, it was taking the three schools, which were large schools, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight, and we're just redistributing our students into 4 schools. The community in 2012 rejected the bond that would have built 3 larger elementary schools. And some of the things we heard back were that the bond was too much and that the community wanted smaller schools. And so that's how we kind of moved. And if you recall at that time, we then moved staff. We weren't hiring 15 new teachers. We were moving existing staff from the 3 buildings there. But things that did cost more money. We added a full-time librarian just like the other schools. We're adding custodians. We didn't necessarily add a principal at that point because we had a principal who was on assignment and had been an assistant principal, but there's lots of things that just go into opening up the doors each year. And so as we started thinking about that, when we're moving forward here, we started looking at, what would the new costs be, or what would the savings costs be in addition? And so the conversation that Director Sullivan and I have continued to have is there are theoretical savings and then there's actual savings. In theory, we might save on transportation if we were to close an elementary school. However, if we were to close one, we'll also pick up costs because different bus routes are still going to have to run. In fact, some might even be longer than they were before. There will be utility costs, but you still have to heat the building and it's not a complete savings. You still have to insure the building. And then the staff is also kind of partial savings. Yes, we have nurses that we could look at. We have front office staff, supervision, but some of those things would move to new buildings as well. A principal, for instance, might become an assistant principal because now we have 3 big schools instead of 4 smaller schools. And so when we really start looking at copiers, printers, materials in the buildings, we think that it would, about $800,000 is probably the ballpark estimate for savings when we open up the buildings. Director Sullivan, additions.
Yeah, as Dr. Rundle mentioned, there's a theoretical and actual. If we were to close a school, shutter it totally, we would lose 300 to 350 students. Savings would be about 2.6 million. But that just isn't gonna happen. We may lose 50 students or 100 students just due to enrollment, but those students will be placed elsewhere throughout the district, hence the needs are there, the teaching is there, the nursing is there, et cetera. So as Dr. Riddle mentioned, we see a savings of about 800,000 if that were to happen.
So we know that this was an interest, certainly, of the boards, and we tried to answer, just to provide some context there, why aren't the savings greater? We answered that question because we know that some of the neighboring school districts have come up with different figures. And, I certainly don't pretend to know how every school district runs their schools. And so I think each district has to come up with their own, but ours was where we were simply because of the unique nature of our island. But our staff, we would still need the staff. We'd still need teachers. It's not like we would be riffing a bunch of people because of that. They would be going somewhere else if the decision came. But I always say if, because none of that has even been decided. But I know that that was a variable of interest.
I just wanted to clarify, when you talk about the building still needing some utilities and some insurance, you're assuming that the building is standing and that you're continuing to use it.
Correct.
So for example, if it were Island Park, perhaps using that as like a pivot location to move other facilities into while those buildings get remodeled.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. And if it was West Mercer and, we were renting it out, say, like we used to do at the North Mercer campus, we could be renting it out, but the margins on the rental were not that great. It was more of a community service to have the daycare, the preschool there, and some other facilities. But, so you get some revenue, but there's not a lot of offset there.
Thank you.
If I may, case in point, we spoke with our insurance provider, the risk pool. Once again, if we were to shutter the building, no use, we'd save $47,000. But we still need to insure it because it's a standing fixture and physical plant that we need to keep insured.
Director Dan.
So this is if we're saving and we don't do anything and just consolidating the elementary schools. But what about the cost of if we maintain things the way they are and we have to upgrade and make the school better? And so I think that should also be part of the conversation of how much that would cost.
Yeah.
Right.
And we'll come back to you at your study session on Thursday, because we had a chance to meet with the Long Range Facility Planning Committee, Director Lurie, Director Glowitz on that. So we had our meeting on Monday night, and kind of did a run through of all of the thinking, making sure that the committee felt comfortable with what we had consolidated, that it represented the committee's work, but it's in there. So I'll give you one stat, but correct me if I'm wrong, Director Sullivan. Just due to energy upgrades and legislative requirements for the Clean Schools Act, Clean Buildings Act, it's about 600,000 that would need to go into Island Park just to get up to code. Am I doing all right? Okay. And so that would be a cost of, that we know we would have to incur just to keep that existing building going. And then there's some others that we'll get into on Thursday.
Any other questions? One of the other districts around us have spoken to is the efficiency of schools. So consolidated schools produce more efficiency, better utilization of classrooms, better utilization of librarians and nurses and such like that. If we have smaller classrooms in 2 schools as opposed to a complete classroom in 1 school, it's more efficient. How do you think about efficiency in this?
I am actually going to go to another slide deck for that, if I may, which is going to come up again in the agenda in a little bit, but let me see if I can get to it quickly here. Actually, it'll come back on Thursday. Oh, no, here it is. So I think we're kind of getting into, what's that cost benefit? 4 schools and 3 schools, bless you. And so if we think about this in terms of, okay, 4 schools, what are some of the, not all, but what are some of the benefits? Well, you maintain those smaller learning communities. You have 300 and 400 students coming to a building instead of 600 kids or 550 or 650 students. You maintain those current neighborhood schools that we developed in the boundary process as part of Northwood. There's more walk to school options. Students aren't having to relocate, and you've got predictability. You've got this sense of predictability and similarity. The point I make, especially on the first bullet though, is smaller learning communities not to be confused with smaller class sizes. Class sizes really don't have they don't change with whether or not you have 3 or 4 schools, because the funding from the state is the funding from the state. What does change though, when you go, when you maintain 4, that's not necessarily up there, is, more split classrooms because of economies of scale. You just don't have the same pockets of kids coming through, and that tends to be what happens. But if we go to 3 elementary schools, to the other side of your point, President D'Souza, we start looking at, okay, you can have a full-time librarian, not a part-time librarian, because you have all the sections you need, full-time specialist teachers, maybe a full-time psychologist instead of splitting between schools. So those are some of the efficiencies from a staffing perspective. As we said, about $800,000 would be the savings by going to 3. You get more students into modern learning environments, potential capital cost savings of replacing 2 and not having to upgrade 3 facilities. And then I think, as you were alluding to, Director Din, it would provide a swing space if the community wanted to rebuild one of the other schools. We would have a swing space to use for that. And so the note I don't have up here, but I always have in my head, is both of these are true. And, this isn't about today saying that we should do one or the other, or that I, as your superintendent, and I think probably it's the same for you, is saying that, yes, there is a definite pathway here. What's most important is what's best for our students, our community, and the long-term assets that we have in our community, which is why we're going out to the community later in the month, or in about a month.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we'll discuss it, I'm sure, like in meetings to come, but is people look, I think, at the 800,000 and they say, okay, that's significant, but that seems relatively minor in comparison to the capital for a bond. But it's a little bit more complex than that, right? Because in a post-McCleary landscape, we're constrained when it comes to wages and salaries. So we're not able to go out to the community and say, look, 800,000 really isn't that much. With 10,000 mailing addresses, that's $80 a family, right? If the community were to decide that that's worth $80, per residence to maintain operationally for schools. But because we have less leeway, that means we either, we won't be able to offer competitive salaries, right? Or like we return to a pre-McCleary landscape where there's more ability to say, fine, we'll pass a higher EP&O levy to compensate for that higher operational cost. So I think we'll put a pin in that. I think there's a separate question, which is what is the capital cost for renovating potentially 3 elementaries versus 2, and there the numbers get more significant than 800,000. And it's not that the 800,000 is insignificant, but it's just where it comes and how that relates to the capital and why they're not an apples to apples comparison.
And at your study session on Thursday, a week from today as well, we've inserted some of those slides to answer some of those because we've heard that from you and the community. And the intention of the meeting next Thursday is so that the committee is comfortable and they've said, yes, go forward. We want to make sure you're comfortable with what we're going forth with, because then we'll hit the ground running in October, getting out to the community. And I remind people that, I think in 2012, I don't know, I would say we didn't do a solid enough job of taking the committee's work, then going out to the community, and then thinking about the bond. I think we got ahead of ourselves as a school district, and that's something that you've expected of me since day one of being hired, and that is, how am I going to engage the community? And it has to be done, and that's why no decisions have been made by you, by us. This is a committee who's come up with some straw proposals, and now let's go talk to our community members, and that's what we'll be doing in October.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think also the decisions made in the 2014 bond was in an environment of increasing enrollment. The decisions being made now are an environment of decreasing enrollment. And we'd like to give ourselves some opportunity to see if that changes over the next 5 to 6 years and not be too rash on everything as well. So there is a savings to be had by having pivot schools and consolidating students into 3 schools while 1 is remodeled. There's significant savings by not having to do construction while a school is in session right beside each other. So there's lots of other opportunities going on here. And I think it's also worth recognizing in both the 2012 failed bond and the 2014 passed bond, we did look at remodeling or renovating schools, and the decision on both those was to rebuild new schools. The rebuilding of new schools was to upgrade to modern standards, support modern educational environments, the new seismic standards and the new security standards that have come about, as well as the new learning standards. We're much more collaborative. We want to be able to bring kids outside the classroom in small groups, move them back, do shared learning of, say, math or science or reading for kids from different classrooms together. And the new buildings make that much easier than the old buildings do. So there's a lot of work that has gone on in the past to suggest rebuilding the schools as opposed to refurbishing. We probably have to bring the community through that again. Clearly, a lot of the community has changed since 2012. I think we're probably 100% new since that time. Yeah.
The seniors started in 2011.
Yeah, so, yeah, a lot of discussion can be had, and I agree with you, Fred. This next, when we do a bond, we want to be successful, we want to have the community understand what's being built, what's being changed, and what educational outcomes we expect from it. So I think a really thoughtful look at this is important. Our next bond, our bond expires in 2029. Is that right, Matt?
2028, 2029, correct.
So we've got some time right now to think about when the next bond needs to come out. Probably start thinking about it in 2025, 2026, maybe 2027. That's the time frame clearly for another bond. So we're ahead of the curve on all that in terms of having time to go out and having time to make decisions.
So this was just information only, wanted to make sure you got this variable before we get out too much into the community, because I know this was an interest of yours, and we've heard it from some of our community members as well. So we'll be adding this into our conversations going forward.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from board members? Students? Thank you. Let's move on to partial governance process monitoring, facilities and capital assets.
Great.
Projects update.
We are going to set up the table really quickly and bring up Andy Fox and Tony Kuhn, and they are going to walk us through an update. We get this annually in September, which is kind of a recap of what happened over the summer, but also where are we in our capital projects roadmap. We're just in the beginning. We just had our first collections for this newest levy this past April. So we're kind of in the very beginnings, and Brandy and Tony are here to talk about those pieces. So Brandy and Tony.
Good evening, thanks for having us. As Dr. Rindle pointed out, this is an annual September event where we kind of come to you and talk about what we accomplished over the year in the summer, and then set forth that matrix and talk to you about what's to come in 24. Let's see, and we're just going to pull that up. This is also the meeting where we get to look at pictures, right? The June meeting is the dry text, and this one we actually get to look at pictures, so that's fun. We want to advance to slide 3. We accomplished a good amount this summer. Big project was the refresh of the Performing Arts Center. we painted everything up to the catwalks. We had the fine arts staff involved in the selection of colors. You'll notice that there are the tan colored acoustic shells on the side, which was a drive that came from them. And then also new carpet throughout, which transformed the space. And then new curtain, main curtain that you see, and then the scrims behind. So, successful. Next slide. Tony, do you want to talk about this one?
This is really exciting.
This is really fun.
This is so awesome. I worked with Elise over at Crest, and she had started this aquaponics program, or she had this vision of an aquaponics program. And the first few times we met, I kind of scratched my head and I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this massive tank of water? And all I could think about is a flood and all these other things. But as the time went on, and she's basically sold this program to us, and it has turned out to be absolutely amazing. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I thought last year's the culinary arts program was really awesome. No, this one tops it. I've taken Penny, Matt and Fred were both in there yesterday showing them how this works. The plants are growing. I mean, in a matter of weeks, this thing has like exploded.
I gave you a graphic to explain it by.
So there's the 250 gallon tank that has tilapia in it. The tilapia do their thing in this water. They're like a standard fish tank. That water then is pumped through the system, and it basically fertilizes and keeps the plants going in a very high rate of growth. Anyhow, and then it comes back through. It's just a big circle, but it's absolutely amazing. Some of the tanks are filled with like a lava stone. They float, as you see on the first picture where the tomatoes were. I'm still blown away at the fact that these tomatoes are producing tomatoes in a matter of weeks, and I'm still trying to get them to grow on the side of my house in months. Basil plants are massive. I don't know, if you get an opportunity to go take a look at it, it's really cool. The hope is that Elise's program will be able to provide fresh produce and possibly even the tilapia when they get to that point of circulating through to the culinary arts program, so it will actually be working with that program at the high school. So yeah, it's really cool. We're already talking about expansion.
Want to talk about this one?
Yeah, well, this is kind of boring, but we had some asphalt issues failing in our bus lot just over time, just general wear and tear. We get the alligatoring effect that comes on over the years where you get several layers of asphalt that just kind of telegraphs through, and it's just a problem. So we replaced, gosh, I can't think of the total square footage in the bus lot, but pretty much the full main drive aisle of our bus lot. We also created a pathway at the high school where the students have kind of created their own pathway from the student parking lot up to the main campus. They didn't really use the path that was there, so we kind of took that as a hint and we paved the pathway so we can better maintain that. We also did some repair work at Lake Ridge down by the garden area. We had some, the firling was starting to, you could see roots coming through, things like that, was creating some tripping hazards for the kids, so we replaced that large section as well.
Another project that is still underway that we undertook this year was to try and bring West Mercer's playground up to ADA standards. If you remember, this playground would turn into a bathtub in the wintertime. It doesn't drain, and it really has just stairs on two sides out of railroad ties. So all of that came out. We put in, you can go to the next slide, Andrews. We put in a new set of stairs with some little seats off to the side for kids to be able to be part of the activity but not in the activity. Created a new ramp. That part isn't open yet. We're waiting for the handrails to be galvanized, and then those will be installed. And then the next slide. We'll come back about November 14th. And the same contractor who did this work for us will pull all of those wood chips out, all of the play toy equipment out, install new drainage, tie it into the catch basin that was put in this summer, and then the vendor for the play toy will come in directly after and get that in, so it'll all be ready for the kids first of the year. And we really debated with Megan about whether we should start this summer and follow it with the equipment, or whether we should, wait until next year. And she really encouraged us to do it, that they will enjoy it as soon as you put it in, whether it's January or September. So that's a fun project.
I want to know what the pictures of the Gaga pits are.
No accidents at the Gaga Ball pits, just telling. They are extremely popular.
This is not a sexy project, but it is, it's one that's been on our list for a long time. And that is dealing with the fuel situation in the bus lot. So step one of that this summer was to pull out the old pumps, which I think were, gosh, 1950s or 60s vintage. We almost could have sold them as antiques. And brought in new fuel dispensers, and next week the new card reader system will go in that will allow us to manage fuel and have it auto delivered, and also provide better tracking of use of fuel between city and school district. It also includes a new float that will go in with the tanks. And then we're working with this same vendor to explore options, which I'll talk a little bit more about for this year's work, for some, either tank removal or above ground tanks and remediation of what we have in the ground. Tony's staff and I have also spent a good amount of time on the clean buildings compliance. So we think we figured out what we're going to need to do at the high school to be able to comply. There's two paths. There's one to actually bring the building into full compliance in the EUI index. And the second path is to adopt all those elements of the plan that would have a 15-year payback. And it's a little bit more stepped process, and I think that's the direction we're going to go. And then we're also doing the energy audits that are required for the elementary schools. So those will be forthcoming, but it's a long, drawn-out process for sure.
Can I just ask, I was wondering when I was looking through the slides before the meeting, were we able to take advantage of any of that early adoption incentive program?
We haven't been yet, but we're certainly pursuing it, and if it's available to us, again, some of the early adoption also has to do with need.
Right.
So, that always plays against.
We have started on several different, making changes within our scheduling and some of our procedures with the shutdowns over breaks. And just last month, I think we received notice from PSC that we actually had a savings. Well, they looked at it as a $96,000 savings, but basically it was $96,000 that we weren't charged, that we could have been charged, given the fact that we did have, we made these changes. And in turn, they also kicked back a $46,000 incentive back to us because of all the work that we've been doing in making these efforts. So it is paying off.
Yeah.
It does take a lot of time and a lot of effort to make these changes, so.
Thank you.
We've also done a few things here at the administration building this summer that have made it significantly more comfortable. Tony's crew, Kathy, had new solar roller shades installed throughout the building that really cut down the heat gain. We worked with McKinstry to do a study about replacement of the mechanical equipment. And we included in that study some ADA access issues and also fire sprinkler capacity. So that we had those as we were thinking about the long-range facilities plan and what needed to be done. Ultimately, we were able to just come in and rebalance the air system on the upper floor and replace a portion of the air handler and keep things going. So we don't have any big expense with that yet, but we will at some point in the next few years.
Tony has that. It was $130,000 of total savings, which, putting into perspective, our electricity savings was the equivalent of 68 US homes, and the gas savings for CO2 emissions and whatnot was 19 homes by putting in those additional pieces. So.
Impressive. Kathy's worth her weight in gold.
That she is.
This is your other favorite project from the summer.
So we, at the 3 old elementary schools, we replaced the 20-plus-year-old dishwashers that have been the death of me over the last 2 years, keeping them running on a daily basis. But we also replaced the one at the high school, so not a really, really fancy about it, but it was definitely needed to be done, and it was a fair cost to our capital projects hit, but it was a great addition, and I know the food service staff is very appreciative of it.
And we have spent a good amount of time this year on the long-range facilities plan process. I think we've had our 6th meeting, and although, for those of you who sit in the meeting, they seem like there's just a lot of information that's being shared. There's been a lot of time and energy put into gathering, creating all of the things that you're seeing. So I think we've made great progress, and I'm excited to do the study session with you next week and let you know where we're at. Okay, projects planned for 23-24. This sheet has gotten so long, if you remember, I think I used to do it as an 11 by 17, but it's actually unreadable at that. There are a couple of themes, I'm not gonna go through all of these with you, but next summer we're gonna have a lot of resealing and restriping of parking lots. We've kind of taken things as far as we can, but the high school and all of the elementary schools will have that. We have been talking about acoustics in the commons area in combination with some flooring. So that's a project we'd like to really take a look at this year. We have some preliminary designs for it. We have the energy upgrades, ongoing infiltration system and Department of Ecology maintenance on the 2014 infiltration vaults that were placed there. And then the gym curtain replacement, which clearly we just keep pushing year after year. Islander Middle School, no big changes there, new building, don't have much planned for the classic building. And again, pretty extensive rain garden maintenance there. Northwood, it's time for the reseal and restriping. There's grass field rehabilitation that needs to be done at Northwood. And then our infiltration, but you'll notice that, the new schools have a fairly small list. Go to the next page, Andrews. At the older elementaries, we really keep pushing things out year after year. There are some pretty significant things that need to be done at all 3. They need to be carpeted. There's flooring to be replaced. Grass fields need to be rehabilitated. Playground equipment needs to be replaced. Lots of, we'll have energy upgrades that need to be done. All 3, well, we've replaced Lake Ridge's roof, but the other 2 need to be replaced. And we have boiler and hot water tanks that need to be replaced. And, Tony and his crew have done a great job of kind of keeping things going. But when we talk about the kind of investments that are going to need to still be made in these buildings if they're not replaced, we can only push it out so far. And carpet at West Mercer is the original carpet. It's time.
The original carpet from the 90s or the 60s?
90s. Not the 1965 carpet. We did replace it when we did the renovation. That did get done. So just, keep in mind, we're certainly going to look at all of these. We'd like to wait until some decisions come out of the long-range facilities plan so that we're making wise choices. But all of those just keep getting pushed year after year. We also have a big miscellaneous category. So potentially, if there is something that comes out of the long-range facilities plan that we need to do a concept design on, we would need to front fund that. We're going to continue with this fuel station work and the EV bus charging, right? So we've got the 4 in, we've hired an electrical engineer who is helped us scope out what we would need for a full EV capacity there, including a couple of high voltage chargers for visiting buses. We're taking that and working with Puget Sound Energy to do a service application to figure out what it would take to get power into the lot, and then it would be built out incrementally. But that's a long process, and we want to get in front of that so we're ready when the time comes. Furniture upgrades is kind of an ongoing thing. District-wide painting, Again, all three of those old elementaries are due. I think the big one we want to tackle this year is the high school. Most of the exterior surface on that is original from the 97 remodel. So that's ready for, a few little stucco repairs and then the stucco flux back over it, and then also cleaning and sealing the brick. Let's see, security cameras, clean buildings compliance, water testing, special ed, all of those are kind of, year after year, we just continue to work on all of those. The other big one I wanted to mention tonight is the Mary Wade Pool. And if you remember, last year, we applied for a planning grant through King County. We were awarded that. It was a 100% grant. There was no matching requirement to it. Conducted that planning grant. We used the outcome of that to apply for a $2 million grant this year. Just recently, we're notified that we were preliminarily awarded that grant. That grant is a 1-to-1 match, and so it requires $2 million of CapTech money to be put into the project. And we have not received a draft contract yet.
Is that why you say preliminarily?
Yeah, I mean, they award it to you, then they update the portal, then you have to submit a bunch of information, it has to be approved, then they will send us a draft contract. And one second, Dan, the piece that is a little bit concerning is when we received the contract for the planning grant, it had a requirement that the district, in exchange for $97,000, keep the pool open and operational for 30 years. And Aaron and I challenged that and said that seems just a tad bit excessive for $97,000 planning grant, which they agreed to, and they pulled that term out, but said that will be in a construction contract. So, I think there's some conversation to be had about whether $2 million is worth a 30-year commitment on the pool. And I think, the first step is to ask them if that's negotiable, right? Could we bring that down to a more realistic number, because $2 million does not buy us 30 years in the pool. So lots more conversation to come. But the good news is we've been potentially awarded that grant. So.
And you'll see in the paper today on the front page is an article about that, and obviously our contracted group OCA, they've been tremendous partners over the years in operating it. No reason why they wouldn't be really excited about this, but you can hear the reservations that as the owners that we have, it'd be kind of like being a renter in a home that all of a sudden you found out that, somehow the home was receiving some restoration grant, and being very excited about the homeowner thinking, but if I have to commit to this for 30 years and it's only gonna do a 1/10 of the project, how much does that work out? So lots of details to work out. And always great to get a grant, but there's always some strings that we also have to work through, because asset protection is really important.
A few questions. So one with Mary Wade Pool, is there a deadline of where we have to respond, or is that a negotiation where there's no set deadline?
We received the notice from the county saying, hey, you've been awarded this grant. We will send you an email when we update the grant portal, and then you can submit all of this information. And once we've approved all of that, we'll send you your contract. They haven't updated the grant portal yet. So in their original timeline that they put forth for this grant process, submit this time, this is how long it'll take us to review it, on and on. They anticipated that contracts would be available by the end of the year. And they've stuck pretty close to their schedule. So I imagine they'll need another 2 or 3 months to get contracts out.
It's fascinating with 30 years. I mean, needs are gonna change, technology is gonna change.
Kids might be swimming in midair by 30 years from now.
They might not, yeah, exactly.
And then a couple questions just about sort of some of the facilities that have sort of programmatic impacts. We heard from the radio broadcast, it expanding. If there's any need for expanding, studio or other sort of specialized space. And then one question regarding acoustics. I saw that for the PAC, it's been deferred pending a solution. but it looks like we are with going forward with respect to the commons. And if you could just add a little bit of like information on that, if, you know, the acoustics are totally different in terms of, and I realize they're obviously different spaces, used different ways, or if it can be leveraged so that the acoustics can holistically in both spaces be addressed at the same time, perhaps with some cost saving.
So to answer your first question, in that long-range facilities plan, when you look at all the laundry list of projects for the high school, one of the big projects is that expansion of the radio program, being able to tie that to a classroom. Right now it's really kind of isolated at the end and everybody's walking in and out and around. So absolutely, that program is on there.
But there's no, I guess like it seems like the program has evolved and is attracting, so at least from my perspective as an individual board member, I think the radio program is one of our crown jewels and something that should be invested in sooner rather than later, and sort of what action would need to happen at the board level to direct funds to that program if it's needed, in fact.
If we could do it with NCAP dollars, you would have already seen it. But we've looked at it really closely, and it's a complex space, and it backs onto a stairway, a rated stairway that is access to the attic above. And where you could connect those rooms and expand it is where all of their technology is back there. And so it's not as easy as the culinary room or some of these others. To do it properly, it's pretty significant, and to give them the amount of space that they need. We've also talked about, is that a time to kind of relocate it in some way or take over TV studio space that may, it is evolving, so.
And we have had several discussions with Joe and his staff and Jen McClellan, and it's definitely on our radar. We don't have anything in motion yet, but there are conversations surrounding that for sure.
Absolutely, and top priority, we completely agree with you. If we can figure out a way to do something, we will.
Staffing has been a big piece of it, of getting the right staffing, because we were running advanced broadcasting before school as like a zero period. We put that into the school day, so we put a lot of the needs that were higher up even than the infrastructure were just the amount of class time, and then as you saw, we've added staffing too. Certainly always need to look at the space itself.
Can I ask a really quick question related to radio? What ended up happening with the radio broadcasting equipment that like someone privately owned and then the district?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, so there is a corporate, nonprofit corporation that owned a repeater that it purchased a while ago, a long time ago, and then that nonprofit corporation sold that and had certain proceeds. That, to the best of our knowledge, that nonprofit corporation continues to hold that money, but has not spent it on other activities. And that's not inconsistent with its charter, though we can go back and ask for accounting of it. At one point in time, there was a consideration that they would be donating that money's earmarked for radio, so they didn't have to, meaning the nonprofit corporation, so they didn't have to administer it through the schools foundation. But that did not, as I understand from Tammy Shoup, that didn't come to fruition. So at this point in time, to the best of our knowledge, it's still held by that nonprofit corporation.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And then Director Glotz, to answer your second question about the acoustics between the theater and the commons, they're very, very different. The acoustics in the commons are to quiet it down and to absorb sound. And so it's just a matter of adding a lot of absorption in there so that it's not so echoey, it's not so loud, and the sound system works better and all of those things. And before we can do the flooring, which really needs to be done, we want to do what's up high so that we're not putting down new flooring and then running lifts over all of it and having to protect it, that we give it the best chance for survival.
And with the suppliers, be different, I understand.
Totally.
Like
yeah. And then in the theater, the acoustics are all about tuning it for music. And we're looking at two options. One is an electronic system that is installed that allows tuning of the space. The other would be a physical change to the space. And we're waiting to get some of the music people off to Cornish College to look at a system before we kind of pick a direction.
And would it be safe to assume that the sort of the electronic, I mean, is significantly cheaper than sort of the physical,
No.
or no?
No, actually, they're probably about the same. You know, they're all gonna be in the $1 million to $2 million range to install. The thing about the electronic system is you can really tune it for so many different needs, right? And that's the challenge in a space like that, is what drama wants versus what jazz band wants versus what choir wants are completely different. And when you build it physically, you're stuck with kind of a compromise of all of those solutions, whereas the electronic solution can really tune differently to each one of those needs. So, more to come. Keep working on it.
Any other questions, students?
No, you also didn't mention the new sinks in the commons bathroom. And those have been so nice, guys. There's no water leaking all over the place, like, it's great. So.
Cool. Thank you for noticing that. I think you're the first person to notice that. I appreciate that.
Okay. Brandy, Tony, thank you very much for keeping our facilities up to date and meeting our students' needs. Most appreciated. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll make a jump to public input right now. I think I see 2 people for public input, Elizabeth Buckley and Adam Regan. And are they present? Yes. And I will just read our public input disclaimer really quickly, but thank you for attending this evening and giving public input. Before I call up the first person, this meeting is a meeting of the board and public. It is not a public meeting that guarantees interaction between members of the public and members of the board. When addressing the board at the meeting, please limit your remarks to not more than 3 minutes. Appoint a spokesperson if the concern is a group concern, and if desired, provide written documentation to the board secretary. Public comments that name or otherwise identify a district student are not permitted without permission of the student's parent or legal guardian. The board may direct the superintendent to respond at a later date to the issues expressed. And with that, please, Elizabeth Buckley.
Sounds like your decision's already made up, so maybe this is premature, or maybe it will just be ignored. My name is Elizabeth Buckley. Our youngest son is in 2nd grade at Island Park Elementary. Our older children are attending the high school now, marching tonight. Also, they went to Island Park. I served as art docent many years, book in the bag volunteer, classroom parent, and I ran the hand-in-hand auction, which raised over $100,000 for the paraprofessional program in 2014. I personally cannot understand why the Mercer Island School Board is considering proposals to close this magical school. Island Park has ample playing fields, covered playing areas adjacent to Dragon Park so class parties can be held there, and award-winning staff and teachers. The Hams, Miss John Lewis, Miss Roram, retired teachers like Miss Better and Miss Lewis, Miss Anderson, who taught our son last year, and Miss Jarnigan, who was the first person I met when I moved here, and then taught our youngest in kindergarten. Carol at the front desk, the amazing principals, Mr. Hoffman, who we love so much, and Mr. Woolmuth, who is awesome. He waits outside every morning and greets all our kids. Now you want to bus all our children north and south. And you seem to have no plan on what to do with the students, but I heard tonight, I now know, you're going to use Island Park to put those kids in while you renovate and displace our children. By the way, do you know what the traffic already looks like on 40th in the morning between the high school and the 2 elementary schools up there? Now we're going to have more traffic. Down by Lake Ridge 2 is also really hard because it's very pinched. Many of us would also like to know what you plan to do with that space long term. Are you going to give it over to the developer that we're supposed to pay $200+ million to close our school and then build these other schools while you displace all of us in the center of the island? I'm just wondering, because in Bellevue, They said they would listen to the people and they didn't. They closed the schools anyway, and tonight it sounds like you're already making plans. Looking at your phone, not paying attention, you have better things because you've already decided. In closing, 4 questions. Is this the correct time to be saddling our district and community with a giant levy while we are facing funding issues due to overall lower enrollment in the district? No. You already said we'd probably lose 50, maybe more students if you do this. Is it wise when our credit rating has been downgraded? Is it wise to close Island Park when the district has not fully investigated why all these students are missing? 650 plus, I thought, but since 2019, it's over 1,000. Is it wise to bus kids who once walked to their school and destroy the close-knit community of the Central Island? No. In closing, I'm leaving a copy of a petition I started this week. I have volunteers who will help me distribute it further. I ask you again, please, to not close Island Park. Seems like you've made up your mind already, though.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. We hear your plea to preserve the community of our teachers and students at the center of the island. Most appreciated for your input. And I've got your 4 questions as well around, is this the right time to be doing levy? Is this the right time with our downgraded credit? What happened to the missing students? As well as why should we destroy a Central Island school? So I appreciate your input. Let's move to the next person. Adam, please.
Good evening, school board directors and Superintendent Rundle. My name is Dr. Adam Ragib. I'm a Mercer Island resident and father of 3 children. I believe in public schools and I've attended public schools and university from kindergarten through grad school. I'm the son of 2 educators, and my wife and I moved to Mercer Island primarily for our quality public schools. I'm concerned about our district, and based on the data that I've currently seen and discussed with other concerned parents, it is my opinion that any talk regarding Island Park is merely a distraction from the larger budget problem, which ties closely with recent enrollment declines. Because I rely on data, not ideology, I'm concerned with the lack of acknowledgement and desire to fully understand concerning data regarding our district. Nearly 500 kids have left our district per state data. These children were already born, so referencing declining birth rates does not pass any numerical test. These children already live on Mercer Island, so citing high housing costs cannot be the only reason. A number of parents I've spoken to have expressed their dissatisfaction with middle school policies, and the data clearly demonstrate that enrollment at the middle school has not yet recovered post-COVID. If we can re-attract a mere 45 students at Mercer Island School District's per student revenue, that equals the $800,000 in projected savings from closing Island Park presented earlier today by Dr. Rundle. Elementary school data enrollment, however, does appear to be recovering, and this is in line with census data. It concerns me to hear that a number of those controversial middle school policies may be rolled out in the elementary schools. Does the district fully understand the reason for this lack of recovery in middle school enrollment? Can you say for sure that it's not due to these controversial policies? If unsure, we should not roll down policies from middle to elementary, as that would spread the contagion that could be preventing our middle school enrollment recovery. Returning to high housing costs, I hear often that enrollment is down because families are being priced out of MI. That claim appears to be patently false based on Census Bureau data. The 5 to 9 age demographic accounts for an increasing amount and percentage of Mercer Island residents. Families with children aged 6 to 19 are an increasing proportion of the Mercer Island population. It is my opinion, based on the data that I've reviewed so far, that proposing to close an elementary school in light of a growing elementary-aged population, a growing number of school-aged families, and financial problems is likely a distraction from those real issues that ought first to be solved. Our families and our children are looking to you to lead, which means that these real-life data must be understood and addressed instead of being pushed out of focus by emotionally charged topics. It is possible to remain committed to public schools and to support our district and teachers while simultaneously asking for our district to course correct on these very real problems. I implore us all to not be distracted. I'm happy to share the graphs, raw data, and public data sources with anyone interested. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'll remain in attendance as long as my infant daughters allow tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate your feedback around the questions. And please, if you leave the documents with Fred, we will copy them out and possibly
Those are just the graphs that I flashed up that are hard to see.
That's fair.
And if you want to send them electronically, just talk to Ian, and Ian will give you my email. Just send it directly to me, and we'll have that as well. And Elizabeth, the same with you. If you have electronic things you want sent, just talk to me.
And I also appreciate the questions you asked and the data you would like us to look at regarding both the policies that we're enacting in the middle school as well as the census data around these groups of kids that are still in the community but not attending our schools. So thank you very much for doing that research and look forward to seeing your graphs as well. Okay. With that, let's, any other public input? I usually do a call just in case. But if I seeing none, let's keep moving on with our agenda. Thank you very much for the public input. This is what we're here for. All board members, students, and staff appreciate it very much, so thank you. Keep going. Students on governing boards, 2B. Asha, Ava, please.
Yeah, so we'll start with the elementary schools. We haven't had our first superintendent student advisory meeting, so we don't have a ton of information on the elementary schools, but we know that Northwood added some new playground structures, and that recently had its grand opening. And as we heard from Mr. Fox and Mrs. Fox and Mr. Kuhn, they're rebuilding the West Mercer playground. We know that West Mercer hosted an ice cream social and Island Park hosted a family fall picnic. So that was really exciting for families to come and meet other families. All the elementary schools are in year 2 with the new ELA and math curriculum, the iReady programs. And so all the teachers and staff are getting more acclimated with that, and the assessment window is open right now. So they're getting that fresh data about students and what they're learning and stuff.
Now we're going to talk about the middle school. So at the middle school, sports and clubs such as cross country, volleyball, debate, coding, they're all up and running. And additionally, there's a new drill team club this year, which started in the spring, where high school drillers come down to the middle school to dance with their younger counterparts and act as assistant coaches. And that's really great to see, like all the student mentorship. And then other student mentorship happening is with the web leaders at the middle school. So like the 8th graders came in early on the first day of school to welcome the 6th graders, which is super exciting to see. And then also middle school students have been attending a lot of fall football games and connecting with like the older students in the high school. And then finally, additionally, the middle school hosted a back-to-school pizza family event, kind of like the elementary schools did, and over 300 people attended, and that was a really great event for new families to get welcomed to the community.
Yeah, so at the high school, back to school was pretty normal this year. We had the Maroon Wave back to school assembly and link crew, so that's really spirited in the high school right now. But now that it's our 3rd week, the classes have been getting a little bit more intense. Some of the cool things going on in our science classes right now is our AP Environmental Science course. We'll be going down to Ellis Pond next week to test out the waters. And the AP Chemistry class is going to be lighting up a stuffed monkey next week with chemicals. So we just have some cool stuff going on in our classrooms, including our new Human Geography class, which 9th graders have really enjoyed. It also has the climate change piece, which has been really great.
Can you give a little more info? Is it real stuffed monkey or like stuffed animal? And if it's stuffed animal, why is it not a snail?
It's, Mr. Sue picked it out, and it's a stuffed animal monkey, and they're just gonna use chemicals to light it on fire.
Yeah, it's been through a lot. It gets blown up every year, so. Yeah.
Not deterred, it's that.
Curriculum night is gonna be on September 27th, and that night Crest will also have an open house, so maybe they can see the new Aqua Center, but just install us.
Yeah, we also wanted to share a couple of keynotes in the athletics and clubs. So first of all, a senior, Piper Engie, recently placed 3rd in the Junior World Championships for 50 breaststroke, and will be swimming with the national team, so that is huge. And then next is the cross country team will be a fall sport to watch this year, because there's 3 runners who are ranked top on the world scale, and 2 of them just moved from the East Coast, so that's super exciting. And then Cheer is also hosting a clinic for preschools and elementary schoolers, which is good for community building since the cheerleaders are like mentoring younger children. And then next is so fall sports in general and clubs have been in great attendance. and clubs such as E-Car, Women in Business, and Morgan's Message have been up and running and have been getting freshmen involved. And then finally, the band has been preparing for the Macy's Day Parade, and Seattle Times recently interviewed band directors and the drum majors about it.
So students definitely appreciate all the work that teachers put in this summer. A lot of students have been noticing the new Schoology policies and grading policies that are now being in effect, and teachers are really trying, which has been great for students. Another really big change has the COVID isolation room changed to a career readiness center. And so we have 2 people, I think there's 2 counselors that have been working there and helping students, and they've been hosting several events for all the seniors to help them get ready for that. And ambiance is definitely really hard to navigate, so it's been really great for seniors. We expected this, but the Lenovo's and Cumulative have been 2 big tech changes in the high school, and that has definitely been a learning curve, but I think everyone is committed to learning that and figuring out how to best use it in the classroom. Another expected problem that we faced is there is less sections of classes this year, which it's made classes a little bit fuller and hard to switch around, but I think students have been really flexible with this. They've started using some more of the MI online classes and also using Running Start, and Running Start starts next week. So I think our students are really flexible and they get creative with their schedules.
And then, so now Ash and I want to talk a little bit about our goals for this year, which is focusing on belonging and also how we can make our peers feel safe in school, which is part of the belonging. And this year we want to do that by in superintendent student advisory and in Senate to define what belonging means with other students, and to also create action items with students to help them feel like they have more of a voice and they are more included at the schools. And we also want to continue to work on projects from last year about eliminating barriers surrounding Schoology, grading periods, and homework over break, which is what Asha talked a little bit about just now. And then we are super grateful for all the teacher improvements, and the students are definitely very grateful for all the work that the teachers are putting in. So yeah, excited for the next year.
Thank you very much. Any questions from directors?
Thank you. Well, a comment, I love the new dual team. I saw them at the football game, and the energy was crazy.
They're really good.
Yeah, I love the energy. I just want to clarify, when you mentioned that a lot of the classes are there's less options.
Yeah.
And so students are taking other things. I just want to clarify, are they taking other options because it's electives that they want, or because they can't get their core classes to graduate?
A lot of times it's they can only run so many, there's less sections of certain courses, so they'll still run 18 biostat or 18 stats, but they'll only have 1 or 2 periods where they used to have 4 periods, just because of how enrollment is and everything. So if they want to take it, and it's mostly elective classes, then they'll just go online, and they can take the same exact course online, or they can take a similar course at Running Start.
Yeah.
Those are also the courses that we're talking about doing that A and B, so that if you don't take it your junior year, then it's offered the senior year, and so that we can, similar to what we do with econ.
Yeah. And do older students get priority in signing up for classes like that? Or is it if you tried to get in last year and you didn't get in, is there a wait list or something?
There's definitely, first priority is any senior who needs certain credits to graduate in a pathway through. And then off of that, it's usually our seniors then working down in how many classes can students get as it goes forward. I think one of the ongoing challenges that we have is the registration process in the spring, and then a lot of students having changes they make different changes over the summer or different ideas, and now all of a sudden they want to switch classes. So we staffed in the spring for these classes, but then all of a sudden people are dropping classes, then that class goes from being a 27 or a 32, which was full, to a 22, and then the people want into something that we didn't staff for and in the spring the demand wasn't there. So that's one thing Principal Wold and I have already talked about. to work with the counselors and to start looking at that entire registration process. Because obviously, something isn't working in terms of what people are choosing at one point and then actually getting into.
Do we track what those courses are that students are taking online because they couldn't get into a live class? Because I think certain subjects and courses might be more challenging to take in an online environment versus in person, particularly if they're foundational courses that might deal with complex material, whereas other ones might lend themselves more readily to online learning.
We do, and part of that will be in the OE9 report that comes in December to you when we do the ALE update, which is part of that OE9 report. And so we can be sure to call that out of, what are the classes. You're gonna see a decline in math because Calc BC moved into an actual class at the school and is no longer, isn't an online option. Well, it's not an online course that we're offering. So you're gonna see drops in some areas and you might see something go up somewhere else.
Are we, I'm sure the registration time is because that's kind of when there's time to do it. I mean, are we set on it being January, February? I just know with high schoolers and so much is word of mouth and trends and then, they're 6 months is a long time for them to go between signing up and then actually starting the course.
Yeah, the challenge is staffing and then our contractual obligations around notices if we're not gonna have something. So, we have to work backward from that, unfortunately.
Okay.
And I also think that as we offer more diversity of classes, it also makes it harder to offer a lot of sections of certain classes, right? So there's also that balance. So I can imagine the difficulty that y'all are doing.
I think I shared with you all last year just the anecdotal feedback from Cardonics, which was the new software that actually helped us with registration this year to get reports sooner, faster, and better consolidate. And the representatives who helped us, they just could not believe the size of our course catalog for the size of our school. They just kept saying this is not what they see anywhere else in terms of the options, not only options of variety, but also levels within courses, whether or not it's honors or an AP. And so, there's a piece to that too, but that's what our students have wanted over the years are these different options. So we have to think about it in multiple ways.
Thank you, and I appreciate the work you're doing on belonging. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful idea. And certainly we've got all our elementary schools communities, as we talked about earlier, but those change as you get to middle school and high school, and with new people coming into the island, international students coming into the island, lots of changes in middle and high school as well. So I really appreciate that. I think that's a really nice sense.
Can I just ask a question, since we were talking about it, on the topic of class availability and the range of classes being offered and stuff? I had a parent reach out to me today to ask a question about something that I had not realized, which was that some of the AP classes are offered like kind of collectively by like multiple school districts together. That's what she was saying, I guess online. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know a lot about that if it's online. If there's we don't have any partnerships with different districts. There are online options for AP. You can take courses online for AP. But like through WANIC and those aren't courses that I know WANIC, our consortium, offers. So I'd be interested to learn more, maybe and get a name and learn more.
I actually told her to reach out to you because I was like, I have no clue. I was like,
there are online academies and schools that offer AP courses, but not that we're directly affiliated with others in the region.
Right, okay.
Yep.
She'll be coming away.
Great.
Sharifa, thank you very much for your report. And we look forward to more discussions around your goals that you want to accomplish in the future. And if there's anything the board can do to assist on that, we should also bring those to the table for discussion and or actions. So appreciate that and looking forward to supporting that. With that, let us move to our enrollment update 2C.
Great. Typically, enrollment updates come as your OE9 report, as I referred to again, which is December, but I think last year we started to kind of give a mid-report and wanted to provide that as well, especially as enrollment starts to come more and more into focus with our current school year. So just some broad reminders of the thinking that we're constantly doing. We know that none of this happens in a vacuum, and that when we're talking about enrollment and all of these the confluence of these different issues, that there's, how are we engaging with our community members? Are we reaching out in OE3? We're thinking about the budget and financial constraints or latitude that we have, asset protection with our buildings and facilities, and certainly how does it impact the instructional program? And I think enrollment, is at the epicenter of this, because that's where our students are. So this graph, I think, has been really helpful with the Long Range Facility Planning Committee, and I wanted to bring it forward to us because it always sets things in context a little bit and offers a nice reminder. On the far left there of the graph is a designation of kind of when the Boeing bust happened, and then what we saw with enrollment historically. We see that cluster of orange flags there, and that's when the school district was closing a number of elementary schools. The one caveat to that is the East Seattle school, in terms of when it was actually closed to students being in it versus when it was sold to the Boys and Girls Club. And so that 80 range really represents when it was sold. We were phasing kids out before that. We had a conversation at the Long Range Facility Planning Committee, thanks to Director Murray.
We're getting historical perspective. You saw my text on it, yeah. It was closer to the 70s, I think.
Yeah, mid-70s, and we found some notes in the book too that were contradictory. But nonetheless, you can see where the district was declining in enrollment and was making decisions about elementary schools. And then a consolidation when the North Junior High was also closed. Then there was a decision in the mid-80s to change the configuration and go to the middle school model. And that's when we went to the K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. Then we had steady growth there coming through the 90s, and then kind of a little downward trend and swinging back up. In 2012, though it's not on there, it's always a reminder that that's when the bond that was going to rebuild 3 larger schools failed. And then 13, 14, right after that was the bond to build Northwood to have 4 smaller schools. Unfortunately, though, we had no idea it would happen. In 2016 is when the birth rates in King County did start declining. And as we talk, and I'm working with other superintendents around the region, that's definitely something that districts are seeing far and wide as we're moving forward. And then we had the COVID pandemic, and as was even described earlier in public comment, we saw that drop of enrollment during that time. So now we have to look forward to the projections of what might we see, and at least the projections show that there's slight decline forecasted with then kind of returning to where we are now for elementary schools. And if we zero in a little bit more, that's what this is really showing us, that we can predict that our elementary schools are going to be fairly stable over the next decade. Our demographers would always tell us that 3 to 5 years is about where they feel most comfortable. Outside of that, it gets harder and harder to predict. From a historical perspective, then just going back and a reminder of where we were with the schools and how large were they. We see Lake Ridge, Island Park, and West Mercer all quite large. We had a number of portable classrooms at that time. And then when we opened up Northwood, as I was describing earlier, it wasn't because we were getting an influx of 200 or 300 students, but rather we took that existing population and we spread it amongst the 4 schools. 2019-2020 is up there because I wanted to show where were we in that year when COVID first started to impact us. And so that's where we were still at 1735. And then where are we today in terms of what that decline looks like as we move forward. Seattle Times this week, you might have seen an article there, declining public school enrollment. The state is forecasting 5% decline in schools across the state in terms of enrollment over the next decade, or excuse me, at 5.4%. The national, they're looking at a 5% decline. So what's happening here locally is also being forecasted nationally. This is the first time we've seen this. You saw it in the demographic studies as well. We talked about this slide here and thinking about, you know, what is the value proposition? And you know, I'm sure back in the 80s, they were having similar conversations in the community. Director Lurie, as a young student, I'm sure you were at all the meetings.
Oh, sure. Yes, I remember them clearly.
But you know, you're always looking at, you know, what's the best for the community, but most importantly, what's best for our students and the long-term outlook. So a little deeper dive then into our kind of current enrollment and looking at where we are. So last year, our average FTE enrollment was 3,915 students. When we budgeted this year, we projected 3,880 students was that projection. And where we are right now with our FTE enrollment is at 3,863. So we're about 17 students off our projection. And where that largely is in our high school. Our elementaries are actually up 22 compared to projection. Our middle school is up 7 and the high school is down 46, and it's largely the FTE. So we know we have students who are taking different options, either taking a class at Privet, going to Running Start, taking online courses, and taking others. And so I think we're still adapting on the high school projection side a little bit, but the enrollment from year to year at the high school is absolutely flat in terms of FTE. We just thought it was going to come back a little more, but the students are continuing to make, and so it might be that new reality because our enrollment at the end of last year to this year FTE is almost identical at the high school.
So can you, in the future, give us, I mean, I assume that means the FTE and headcount are pretty different because we don't get the same funding for our Running Start kids and our online kids in terms of the classes. So just to have an idea of an accurate picture of, are we losing kids or are they just choosing different educational opportunities at the high school? Does that make sense?
Yes. Let me see if I predicted your question with some of this, but I won't know all of the exact what's or how's, but let me see if I get some of it in here.
Okay, because yeah, I mean, just, you know, I mean, one is budget and one is
the students walking through.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So high level numbers, and then we'll get into each of the levels, elementary, middle, and high school. We had 126 kindergarten through 11th grade students leave Mercer Island School District during the spring or summer. So between February 1st and September 7th, 126 students left our school district. In that same time period, we had 244 students enrolled. And so the K11 is because that's where they were last year. We take out the seniors, and then we don't include the new kindergartners into our incoming there. So the 1st through 12th grade, we have 244 students. So net gain there, which is extremely positive. In fact, over the years, I was looking at this data too just the other day. I think with the exception of 2019, 2020, and 2020, 2021, we've seen this same trend where our incoming are outpacing our outgoing as we look back to those years right before COVID all the way till now. But we did have those 2 years, and that's where we saw that decline in enrollment. So you had 328 seniors FTE who graduated last year, and 187 FTE kindergartners coming in. And so we do have that delta between outgoing students and incoming.
But real quick, I mean, going back to that in sort of the previous slide, in my recollection, as we go back over a 20-year span, we run a little bit over 100 between the delta, between kindergarten and senior, reflecting the fact that we're in a more expensive community where older families move into the island. And I think that's reflected obviously in that net inflow across grade levels. But I guess at the same time, one of the things that I wish that we wouldn't talk about as much, I think it's misleading, is the delta between kindergarten and the senior class. Because we've always had 100+ delta between the kindergarten and the senior class. And so I think that obfuscates more than it informs.
Yes and no, and I'll show you some more data on that. Because yes, we're getting them over time, but I think in real time of what we're seeing now, never in my time in the district have we been below 200 kindergarten students coming in. We were 230 even last year when I was back in Lake Ridge looking. And granted, it grows, but I think that's the critical piece of we'll have a lot more ground to make up than we've had in the past. Yes, we gain students, and I'll show you some.
And to me, like, that discussion becomes more, okay, like, you know, let's talk about how the kindergarten class, but this kindergarten to senior, I just wish we would stop talking about it.
I think it's a crucial statistic, because it shows, I mean.
It shows that people move into the island.
It shows that people, right, it's just a statistic, that's what's one factor, and it's an important one. And if our kindergarten numbers are declining, and I think that what's also misleading here is the 328 FTE seniors that graduating, we had between 360 and 380.
Yeah, we had 378 caps walk across the stage.
You know, if we're gonna talk about kids, because kindergartners for the most part are all FTEs. Their head count and FTE are virtually the same, right?
In kindergarten.
In kindergarten. In high school, that's a huge difference. So, you know, I mean, that goes to show that the kindergarten numbers being so low right now are even having more of an impact because we had 380 kids graduate. We didn't have 328 FTEs. They're not FTEs, they're people. So budget-wise, it's FTE, but people-wise, when we look at enrollment numbers, that's humans. So I think all of those stats, you know, I mean, I think I'm getting a little bit frustrated that, you know, there's different ways of interpreting all data. There's no question of that. But all these facts and all these discussions are in public. Community members are invited and have been invited to participate in the discussions. And then coming in at the end and just criticizing without having all of the basis of knowledge is frankly just really insulting the people that have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours volunteering their time. You can have a different conclusion, no issue with that, and have a different opinion on what we should do, but the level of disrespect that I heard tonight is insulting. And I'm not talking about just for me, I'm talking about for our staff and for our community members who took the time to volunteer for the committees. So please volunteer. When things go out and people are asked to volunteer on these committees, they're important. They matter because they have an impact on the decisions that we make in the future. No decisions have been made, I guarantee you. I don't know how many times we can keep saying that. No decisions have been made. This information is going out for community discussions in October. And get involved and participate in the process, not just at the end, because the voices matter. If we didn't care what people had to say, the board here would just make a decision, which is not what anyone here, I think I can speak for the 5, 6 of us, is interested in doing. We want to know what the community wants to do. And I think that's what Dr. Rundle said, the mistake from 2012 to 2014. I didn't even know there was a committee at that time living here with a young child. So with a young child in the school. So the fact that I didn't even know there was a committee shows that we had room to improve in terms of involving the community. I'm glad that there was a committee, but we didn't meet the goals that I think they were looking to meet. So we can only do better, and we can learn from the things that we've done, but facts are facts, and opinions and conclusions need to be based on actual facts and not what people think they might want to see or what they think maybe is the reason. But let's go to the data and make decisions based on data, and then people can have different opinions, and that's welcome. So people are putting a lot of hard work and time into this, so step in and participate, please.
I actually didn't know there was a committee either.
I know.
It's
And
called
you
the
had,
21st
and I had
Century
3
Planning
kids in
Committee.
the schools, and, well, I mean, I
No,
had 2 kids in
yeah,
the
right,
schools
but that's
older
right.
me, and then a BE,
You
so,
probably
yeah.
was.
So if we look into elementary a little bit more, kind of back to here, we thought we'd get a few more kindergarten students. We were off by 16 on our projection with kindergarten, and the good news is, as we typically see, and you're gonna see another graph here or set of points, we look closely at that first grade number because we know we have a number of families who choose private options for kindergarten, Montessori, and some others. And so this is one of those places, Director Glowitz, where we do see the students start to come back, and we're looking for that. So we did see students come back for kindergarten, or for first grade, and so we were up 23 compared to last year. So not compared to projection, but compared to last year, we picked up 23 new students for first grade, so essentially a class. And then if we look at our second to fifth grade, we were projecting 1,046 and we actually enrolled 1,085 students to start the school year. So we were up 39 there. So overall, our elementary came in well. As far as the middle school, kind of a different way we look at stuff. So here we're looking more at actual to projection. I wanted to show you another way that we look at the data, and that is sometimes we're just looking grade level to grade level. What's happening. And so in 2022-23, our fifth grade class was 305 average FTE for the year. When they rolled up to become sixth graders, another decision point oftentimes for families who might have been in private K-5, we picked up 16 students above where we were. And from sixth grade to seventh grade, we picked up 7 students. And seventh to eighth grade, we lost 4 students. So up overall, not as much as the elementary, but up overall compared to where we were. And then when we look at our high school, and I think Director Lurie, this might get into maybe some of those questions that you were having there. As we start thinking about this, we really have to start looking in high school at FTE to head count. Because it is true that, if a student is, as a reminder, is 6 periods a day, they're considered a full student. We get full funding from the state. If they are taking 7 periods during their day, we don't get any extra money from the state, but we have our levy that helps to offset those costs. But if they take 5 or fewer courses in the high school, then we're only getting partial funding from the state. So our 8th graders through our 11th graders last year, we had 1,408 FTE. When they rolled up and became 9th and 12th graders this year, the head count was 1,441, but the FTE is 1,404. So again, we're looking at that delta between the head count. The good thing is we already know there's 4 students out there who are coming back at the semester because they've already told us. So, we're gonna lose students and gain students, but you can kind of see it's pretty flat. We didn't necessarily lose students or gain students overall.
I'm probably not gonna say this right, I'm asking this question, so bear with me. I know that I thought it was head count that was also a factor in how the levy is assessed, like in terms of like, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, so our levy that we collect, which is not on property value, but rather is on our student count, how is that calculated?
Is that that's by FTE?
Yeah.
I did not know that, okay, thank you.
So a couple other things, our graduating seniors, 378 head count as we talked about, but 328 FTE. So that's the point of more students there.
We need to talk about that for legislatively.
Yeah, I think so.
Why,
too.
yeah, that's huge,
Yeah.
2,500 per student, if we're down, even in one grade.
Right.
Because those
60
students need
kids.
services, they need
Right.
the staff.
We don't
need
treat them by how many
specific
classes they take here at the high school. We want our students to take what they need.
Right, 2 prongs to that. One is that we're still behind where Seattle is collecting, and 2 is that prong.
It's huge.
It has been interesting though that the incoming in the middle has still been about 100 students, again, as Dan had also mentioned.
Yeah.
But the delta between the kindergarten and 12th grade graduating is huge, to Deborah's point. because of the FTE versus headcount perspective.
Right.
And I think depending on where people are looking at enrollment in our schools, we can easily get confused on FTE and headcount. That's a 50 student delta there, that's pretty significant.
Well, I think it shrinks, right, like for this year, like in terms of the FTE, the delta between FTE and headcount.
Yeah, it usually starts and then, people make different choices or whatnot, so it's hard to predict, but there's always some flux. So our ninth graders, they tend to be the ones that do take 6 or 7 periods. They're not, they haven't already fulfilled all their requirements and decide, well, why am I gonna take an extra class? I'm gonna graduate, I can graduate anyway. So 337 students on a head count and 336 FTE. Compared to our seniors, getting at your point, Director Glow, it's 393 seniors with 364 on the FTE. And so you can just kind of see as students get older, they're making different choices. They're going to Running Start or they're making.
And we typically have about 50 students at Running Start, right? Between juniors and seniors.
Yep.
Whether it's part-time or full-time.
Exactly. So anecdotal data summarizing some of those things. Great news on first grade, 33 new students, sixth grade, 30 new students, ninth grade, 33 new students. And then 11th and 12th grade, I thought it was a little higher, but I corrected this number from a presentation I gave to PTA. But still, 22 students coming in 11th and 12th grade is a little higher than I recall. So I'm going to do some digging into that. But overall, 244 new students enrolled in our school district who weren't here at the end of last year.
What do you mean by unexpected transition years? Transition years, I assume, means like elementary school to middle school to high school.
Yeah, and then 11th to 12th grade, we just don't tend to see kids moving because they're already in a high school. They tend to stay in their high school, even if they live in the Puget Sound region and they move here. A lot of times, families will finish out at Roosevelt or wherever because that's where the students been all along. So 22 new 11th to 12th graders is catching my attention. Yeah, in a good way, in a really positive way. So then I started looking a little bit more at with students who are withdrawing and what's happening with the trends. So in the first year of COVID, so between February 2019 and September 2019, which is essentially COVID closure was in March. And so this was the kind of that first part, this is right before COVID. February 2019 to September 2019, we lost 4.5% of our students. Now that always is offset by students moving in, but 4.5% of our students didn't return. In the first year of COVID, that's the February 2020 to September 2020, that jumped to 7%. And that's where we started to not have as many students moving in as we're going out, and that's where that cliff started to happen because it repeated again in the in the February 21 to September 21, that we lost another 7.7% of our students who chose different options. We started coming back. We had the year where we began in masks, but we finished through. That dropped it to 5.3%, and then we're moving forward now where last year compared to this year, 3.2% was all that we lost in terms of students who exited the district. When I break those down, and you'll get more in December after we've surveyed families and we've broken down the data, but from what families have told us, you can see that 17 went to a different public school in the state, 36 went to a private or a home school, 24 transferred out of state, 43 were unconfirmed, and then 6 were either exchange students who will come back at the semester, or in some instances when we have absences that are longer than 20 days, we have to stop collecting from the state. So they stay in our numbers, but not in our numbers that we count. The positive there, 3.2% compared to 7%. The negative, we're still losing some families, and we have to continue to work and look at that as we move forward. I saw a report last night on one of the news stations. I think homeschool since COVID is up 43% across the state, and private schools are up 17% across the state. We've got to continue looking. So again, just bringing it back, it all happens within a system, but wanted to get you some information about what we're seeing right now, compared to a little bit ago. And then Matt will start working with the team to do projections for next year, and we'll start the process over.
Any questions from members?
Just one quick question. It seems that since the delta between the projections and the actual, I think, was it 17, that I don't assume this presents any budgetary problems in terms of a loan. I mean, in past years, there's more volatility, right? Okay, yeah, that's what I assumed, yeah.
Director Dave.
I always, my critique is always to make sure that we continue to do our work as a system to make sure that we keep as many students in here as possible. And so, but I appreciate the extra work that you all are doing to really dive deep into those who have exited our district. Because I know that we haven't really been intentional about that in the past. So I appreciate this extra information. And even though we want it even smaller, it is a significant reduction, right? But we continue to do better.
Yep.
And I think when we talked about, it would be helpful for us to also see, I hear that on Mercer Island, people also, there is more of a tradition than other places to go to private school. It would be good to kind of see these data compared to pre-COVID, because there's, there's always gonna be a portion of students who may leave, right? Yep. And then in the demographic data, my question is, I think when we see the low projection for the next couple of years and what is really people are using to make the long-term facility plans and things like that, remind me, Fred, did we include students who have left already, or we assume they're never going to return? And we're just projecting like incoming, or do we take that consideration that a percentage will return? Because I think sometimes in people's mind, they're like, well, what about this group of students who have left? Will they return, and will that number increase? I don't know if that was a part of the calculation. I don't remember.
Matt does a bunch of looks at it a bunch of different ways when we're looking at our own projections of where that would be. The demographers, I don't recall if that's in their reports in terms, I don't think they hypothesize about who's going to return.
So we just assume that we lost them?
Sometimes because we don't know where exactly they went. But any students returning would be bonuses, in terms of trying to get students back. And, we were just meeting with, Learning Services was just meeting with a family with 3 kids, with students in private school. They're talking about literacy. I walked out of an office and met the one of the parents, and there's 3 that might be coming back as early as next week. And so our Learning Services team, our principals, myself, we're meeting with families all the time, trying to think about different ways and reaching out. We can do better though.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of also to Deborah's point, if we present numbers, I would like it to be for the purpose that we present it for, because I think it is good to stay with headcount if we're presenting on our retention and our retention efforts. Then if we want to talk about impact budget, then maybe we can do a translation of how much that would impact if we talk about budget. But when we're talking about students, as a whole, we shouldn't mix up headcounts and FTE. It is confusing for a lot of people if they don't have that background, and we keep jumping back and forth.
It's confusing for me.
And so I would recommend kind of being, stay with headcount.
Yeah.
If we're talking about students that we serve, because regardless, whether they are, doing Running Start, we're still serving them.
Right.
And then it doesn't reflect the kind of our retention effort. But then I think it's nice to have maybe the last slide to translate it to FTE of the impact, the budget impact of folks.
It's sort of like headcount with a little asterisk, and then the asterisk is like at the end, headcount is not the same as FTE.
Yeah, or maybe
so the budget impact may be a little different. I do think though that the question of why the FTE dropped so much by the end of our kids' time, like in the high school, is worth looking at some point, just as part of when we look, for example, maybe at the academic rigor aspect of our district, like it's probably good that kids are doing all this, running start and whatever, but are there things that they could be doing within our own school that we would be able to supply them with, and that we would be keeping them more, within the walls of the school, kind of?
Maybe we can have a conversation about Running Start. I have a personal kind of philosophy about Running Start. But I think sometimes we get caught up in what certain program means and how it impacts our kids when they grow up. And so on our part, I think we should educate parents, give them more understanding on the short-term and long-term impact of an 18-year-old, going straight into their major in college, and the impact of it in, so those kind of things, that would be good from a system perspective. Because I feel like when I talk to folks, they think Running Start is a prestigious thing. Some part it is, but then what are they missing out on the high school experience?
And then college experience.
And then college experience. And so those kind of things, I think on a system level, we should provide parents more information.
Yeah, and what courses can we continue to offer in our high school that are dual credit? So you don't even have to leave, but you get high school class, but it's with college, there's some college expectations in it, and then you get a college credit, whether or not that's through UW, Central Washington, Eastern Washington, Western,
So just to comment on that, I mean, that's how, we're a one high school district. And then, to compare us to Bellevue right next door, they're 6 high school district where they've got the international program. They've got Sammamish that has, high quality performing arts and the Spanish immersion program. They've got Interlake that has an international baccalaureate. So kids can do that and get all those college credits rather than Running Start. And they actually get to keep that funding for them. And then we've got Newport that focuses on the AP, and then the one that I'm forgetting, and whatever it is that their specialty is. We can't do all that. Like, we have to choose 1 or 2 or 3. But that's interesting. And I've always struggled with that with Running Start. I mean, kids that mainstream high school, it's not a great experience for them. Go have this other experience. It can be a huge cost saver for people who can't afford 4 years of private college because, they get a lot of their credits out of the way, but then what are they giving up? And anyways, I think I agree having that conversation kind of before senior year would be really good. I also, I get frustrated with the enrollment conversation. I think that we lose sight, or what's missing in the conversation is our number one value is that students are the priority. And each student, we know that each of our students has different needs. We want, I think, for each of our families to be able to provide the best thing they can for their students' needs. Some might be mainstream high school, some might be Running Start, some might be going to a public high school in another district even though they live on Mercer Island. Some might be a private school that specializes in different types of things. And rather than looking at it in the way of like, what are we doing wrong? I would love to be looking at it more in terms of our students getting their needs met. And we're so privileged in this community where many families have the choices that they can make to meet their students' needs. If we can meet those needs here, awesome. Like, what can we be doing better so that we can meet their needs? But we're a public school system. We can't always do that. And they might, if they want a classroom in high school where they've got, 15 kids, we can't do that. We're never going to be able to do it. And if that's what a student needs, which is what some students need, then by all means, we should support that decision. We should celebrate that they're able to do it. So I guess rather than this like attacking thing of who's failing and who's not failing, we need to be looking at these reasons, and I really appreciate the intentionality. But also we need to be looking at our students' needs being met, and how can we help support the families. If they are choosing to go outside our community for school, they're still part of our community. So how can we support them and, it not be this like private versus public, or, students are the priority. Let's keep students as the priority. And if our student needs something different than we're able to offer, then we should be supporting that and encouraging it, whether or not our enrollment numbers go down. I mean, I hope they don't, but
yeah, we'll keep working.
It's just more of a philosophical.
Yeah, I mean, we will keep working as hard as we can with our students and helping them make great decisions along the way. I try not to, cast any opinions or doubts on people who make different options, but I always wonder what didn't we do that they may have been able to stay here in their public school, and we'll continue to work with all of our families in that way. So.
Yeah, thank you, Fred, actually. Just a couple of comments. I totally appreciate the data. I think the retention of students going from 7% down to 3.2% attrition is great. That represents we're meeting their programmatic needs. This is how we understand whether we're meeting students' needs, is that they continue to come to our schools. So that retention, though, numbers going up represents great retention within our programs. Our schools are meeting those students' needs, so they don't have to leave. And clearly there are lots of other reasons people leave, parents getting different jobs, lots of other things like that, but we're back to at least 1 year of getting back to historical trends. I like that approach. I also like the approach you've done, which is to go to our realtors and our preschools and help them understand the benefits our schools provide so that we can rebuild our kindergarten enrollment. That's totally appreciated as well. So I think it really feels like we've got data supporting kind of the outreach and marketing and communication strategies you've been doing, and Ian's work to make, with Niche, our schools more globally known, so that when people start thinking about international transfers back in, which used to be a high, gone down a little bit now, hopefully that helps. And as people start thinking about the King County area, Niche and the outreach we do there will help bring those students back to Mercer Island as well. So I think they're all starting to tie together, and the data you're getting here is supporting the actions you're doing. So that's very much appreciated.
And it's a huge team who's all working on this day in and day out. So I would be remiss not to acknowledge all the team that we have.
Thank you. Any other students? Sorry, any other questions? Anything?
Oh, good. Numbers are on the up, I'll just say that.
And with community, you'll help us retain them here too, and sense of belonging.
That's right.
Let's move on to 2D, communication and support to the board, social media mass action lawsuit.
So this is a return back to a discussion that you had at a study session, I believe last spring, and whether or not, I think the direction that what you wanted to do was have a conversation that was more public than the one that was in a study session, and then lead to some decisions about whether or not you convene an executive session, or we would bring one of the attorneys from the representing law firms in the mass action lawsuit. So Aaron's got some data there, or some information for you. We're here to kind of listen and kind of get some direction from you.
Any thoughts from board members around this?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. I'm not a fan of social media. I'm barely on it myself. I think it's toxic. I think it has a negative effect. With that said, I don't think it's the core of the mission of what the school district does in terms of sort of saying what companies or industries are detrimental to our students, and then I think diverting focus from what really is like our core mission, which is to supervise the curriculum and the visions of the district. I think it's also antagonistic to many parents who work at these companies, and when we start picking and choosing favored and disfavored companies, whether they be social media or video games or otherwise, I think that starts splitting the community apart. So I do not think that we should join this lawsuit, and we'll discuss it when it comes to legislative priorities. Similarly with AI, like I'm concerned, but again, I think far afield from what really like the core of our responsibilities are, and there's only so many things, and I think we already have a lot on our plate as it is.
I don't think, I actually completely disagree. I think that I'm concerned that, you know, if there's people that have financial interests in these companies, that it certainly should be disclosed during this conversation. I'm not necessarily saying you can't have an opinion, but I think it needs to be disclosed. I think that this is directly in point with our fundamentals of the health and well-being of our students. This isn't a hypothetical, at this point, non-evidence-based theory that social media is impacting our students' mental health. We know it is, and we see it happening. I hear you in terms of, you know, I hear you in terms of the community and splitting the community. But I also look at, you know, the income gap and the billions of dollars of income that are going to some people and not others, and that aren't then using their benefits to support the negative impacts on our kids. I think, you know, if people were making that money and then giving it back to the community, or at least a lot of it back to the community, I think I would feel different, but they're not, or at least most are not, and having to be forced with capital gains tax and things like that. Our kids are suffering, and I think it's our #1 priority to make sure that we do everything that we can. It's not like Aaron's gonna be in the courtroom. I don't think that, yeah. It's not like anyone from our district is going to be in the courtroom arguing this, or using really any other time other than, I mean, last I heard it was about 10 hours of providing data that we pretty much already have. If that's different, I would love to hear it, but I think it's our duty and our responsibility to support our students, and shame on us if there's supports that come out of this that can go to mental health funding for our students, and we didn't take the chance to do that. In whatever way. None of these companies are hurting for funds, and if they can help support our students, then, and with some of the maybe unforeseen impacts that their product has caused to our kids, then step up and help improve our kids' lives. If they can't make, that's what a court process is for. If they can't make that correlation, then they won't be ordered to pay anything. But I don't know. I think it's a huge, I think it would be a breach of our duty to our students to not sign on, at least at this point.
I have very mixed feelings about this. I'm well aware, like both, you know, as a parent and as, you know, like a baby social worker of the impact for kids on their body image and their self-confidence from social media, et cetera, et cetera. Like, social media is not great for kids' mental health. On the other hand, I myself am a huge user of social media, so I'd be a giant hypocrite to not acknowledge that. What I would love to see is, I would love to see these companies spontaneously, you know, putting funding into our schools to be like, hey, here's a curriculum on like teaching kids to be digitally savvy. Here's a curriculum, like here's programs to help parents with like how to manage your kids' social media use, or how to make decisions about when your kids should or if your kids should be on social media. So that's not happening. My thinking about this case originally when we first heard about it was like, oh, it would be great if we could get some funding out of this case to pay for that type of thing ourselves in our schools, not so much directly for like mental health treatment necessarily, but for like kind of preventative, you know, education for our kids. You know, it's not a big.
It's limited to after. I think I would assume that it could include preventative as well.
I think that's part of some of those nuances that I don't know if we can provide you with the best answers to, because we're not on the, you know, that's where if you wanted to have representative legal counsel come, we could ask some of those questions. I think right now is just, you know, is that where you want to spend your time and energy?
I agree that it does seem kind of tangential to the main mission of what we focus on and spend most of our time thinking about. But on the other hand, like, I would really like to see some programming like that in our schools or in our community if possible. And I know that we don't have the funding to just do that on our own right now. So, like, I don't know how feasible this is, and I don't know. I feel kind of on the fence about it. What do you think, Jan?
I concur with all of you about how, the impact of social media. And, personally, anytime we can get money from somewhere, I'm like, oh, money for the school. My first instinct is like, yes, sign on, no harm. But I don't think it's a school district kind of thing. I wish OSPI sue them and give us the money instead of having, I liked to sign on to be a part of solidarity with other school districts. That is really my biggest thing. But if we do this, where does it end, right? Because there's so many things that impact our kids. I don't think that it will divide the community per se, because it's really the company, not the people who work in there. But I do agree with Dan in that if we do this, then there's another thing. Do we sign on an anti-gun kind of lawsuit? Do we sign on all these? So it gets kind of on murky kind of ground. But I wish the state or OSPI that they do the suing and they give us the money instead of forcing small districts, forcing us to do the work. But I feel bad if we don't sign on for it too, but if we're not part of the other school district. But as if I had to vote, I would probably lean towards not.
Can I just ask a question on the budget? Is the AG's office not taking a position on this?
As of right now, the first ever lawsuit was actually filed by the Seattle Public Schools in January. I think it was filed by Keller Rohrback. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name. And then since that time, you've had Kent School District, Vancouver Public Schools, Everett Public Schools, Portland Public Schools, Mesa schools and districts in Arizona, so it's sort of spreading through the region. I'm not aware that the AGs have filed, but I haven't specifically looked at that, so I was more looking at an inventory of the schools in the area versus the AG's office. So if you'd like that information, I can confirm for you one way or the other. And I would also like to just make sure that we're clear that the relief being sought, there's actually 2 law firms that are pursuing. There's another firm that is also, which I think some of the information was shared in the last meeting, besides Keller Rohrback. Keller Rohrback is the one that started it with Seattle Public Schools. And at least they're seeking 2 types of relief. One is monetary, which will be monetary compensation to provide sort of additional resources needed to meet the increased mental health needs of students due to the perceived negative impacts of social media. So that's the nexus there. The second piece, the second goal would be an injunctive sort of relief requiring social media companies to change or adjust how their algorithms are designed to sort of direct youth to specific content. So there's sort of 2 different forms of relief being sought. I just want everyone to know what you're deciding to sign on to or not. It's not to recommend one way or the other. But it is 2 forms of relief, one being monetary, one being injunctive relief, which is to cause a change in the algorithm that really drive users to particular content.
Ava, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things previously said. I think this is definitely a really important conversation to have. Especially as a student, a lot of my peers definitely, everyone talks about how many hours they spend on TikTok, how they would spend countless hours on social media instead of doing homework, and how it's often really hard to separate themselves from those social medias. And I think the extra funding that can be gained from this lawsuit could be good for our counseling services, but at the same time, I'm not sure how students could use it, because personally, I know that a lot of my peers, if they have issues with mental health issues, not a lot of people are willing to go out to counselors and talk with them, so it may not be necessary to get this funding. And yeah, but I think it's definitely a really important thing to talk about.
I mean, the algorithm aspect of it is interesting because it's kind of like holding, cigarette companies accountable for marketing to young people, right? Saying A, you need to remedy some of the damage that you've done, and B, you need to stop doing it like you're doing it. You need to make some changes.
Yeah, as I led with, I am not a fan of social media. I think the state AG or other actors, like well positioned, just don't think it's a school district. And I think the companion suit would certainly be video games. I mean, like before social media, if you look at elementary students and the addictive nature of video games, but again, I think once you start going down that rabbit hole, I just think we're no longer doing the job of school board directors. Like, we're other legislative bodies that are equipped to deal with these questions.
So in disclosure, I mean, I'm a tech person. I worked in tech companies. I do not work at Facebook or TikTok or anything like that, but I am familiar with tech. But I totally appreciate what we've allowed students and teachers to do in terms of political activism. So our students have left school to do gun marches and gun control marches. Our students have left school for mental health reasons, for Black Lives Matter, for all these affinity groups. On all sides, we've had meetings with Mathis and put in our journal, in our Islander newspaper. So we've been on all sides of the political spectrum, and we've enabled our students to do that. I think a large part of that is because the board has been apolitical on these things. So I would love the students to have a conversation around social media. I would love them to pick a side. I would love to have great political discourse amongst our students. But as soon as the board gets involved in things like this that are not directly affecting our schools, I think we politicize this board. We make it hard for students to have those conversations. And I think students are the ones figuring out how to have political discourse in a much better way than adults are today. So that's why I recommend staying out of this, because it's not material. So just in comparison, Seattle participated in the Juul vaping settlement, that lawsuit for Juul. Juul is paying $1.6 billion. Seattle, with a big role of participation, is getting about 100K. So that's the net. They are 20 times bigger than us.
When you say big role, what does that mean? Like because they have a lot of kids, or because they had a lot of staff time to contribute? Okay.
Yeah, they were a big name out there, right? And with a lot of kids, with vaping, students of all different income diversity, well-known school district, lots of kids, a lot of weight was there. They got 100K. So 20x bigger than us, maybe we'd see 5K or something similar like that. Another example would be, most recently, there was an article about this issue. The two law firms said they had about 300 school districts, this is in the Wall Street Journal, about 300 school districts sign on. Roughly 10K school districts in the United States. So that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of, well, yeah, maybe there's some affinity, but 300 out of 10K, I don't think that's all something resonating in a big way. Finally, sorry, I'll speak a little bit to our hypocrisy. If we think social media is that bad, why have we done nothing about it to date? In our schools, we could be collecting everybody's phone and putting it away, so that during the school day, you don't have a phone. 25% of school districts in the country collect people's phones, and they don't use it during the school day. We go to so many concerts where they put your phone in a baggie for a lot of other reasons, but we've got a lot of hypocrisy on this. We don't take devices away. We have no education to not use this stuff. And, social media also has positives. You find like-minded people. If whatever your issue, you find like-minded people, and we didn't talk about that either. So when we talk about grading being a problem, we find different grading mechanisms, and we put that in place. When we talk about hard, difficult courses being a problem. We've got a layering of different courses, whether it's honors to standard, and then we've also got helpful remedial math courses. But when it comes to social media, we've got this idea here at the boardroom that it's this huge mental issue, and we've done nothing about it. Zero.
I would actually, I think a couple things. One thing I think is, this is a great topic for us to delve into at some point, like when we're hearing about student mental health, for example. I would love to, I'm sensing maybe a little bit of consensus that it's a topic people are interested in exploring further in some regard. Just hearing about like, do our kids learn anything, for example, in health class about like how to not get addicted to social media, that kind of thing. You know, I know there's been showings of the movie, I forget what the movie was called, but the movie about how the algorithm works, you know, I forget what that movie was called.
Screenagers?
Screenagers, right? Like I think there's been showings of screenagers, that kind of thing. Like what is being done or what is being discussed. Those are some persuasive statistics there you have, like some persuasive numbers you have there of like how little the impact would actually be. I do think this is something that I think where I'm coming down on is on the side of, this is something that I would like to see addressed on more like a national scale. This is something I would love to see Congress do something about, for example, the same way that like, you know, in the EU, they like enacted all these new privacy laws, right? And they actually enacted them. They're not all perfect, right? But I think that if we want to see change on that level, that's sort of like a national level political change. So I'm actually coming down on the side of like, not thinking this is worth all the negatives of getting involved.
I'd love to see the students pursue it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, you know, coming down on the other side, I think all of your arguments are actually very persuasive. I think that, but what I worry about at this point is that I think we know so little about what it is that's gonna be expected of districts and all that. Like a lot of it is speculation. And I think arguments on both sides are speculation because I don't think we have the answers. And I guess the question I have is, like I said, I think everyone's made really good arguments. Are we making a data-backed decision based on, I think, the level of speculation that I think we're all feeling? I think we're making presumptions without having the information. And would it be more responsible to speak with people who are more directly involved and raise these issues with them? Why isn't the AG's office involved? Why, you know, like why is it only 300 districts out of 10,000? What is it that they're hoping to see? You know, I think we probably have more silent parents working on this. And it would be pretty easy to have, you know, even a half-hour conversation to ask some of these questions. So it feels very speculative to me. I would just like to go into it. If your arguments are confirmed, I don't have any problem with it. But I would just be more comfortable if we're actually hearing those from, that those are the actual intentions of the lawsuit and the actual information from them. I don't dispute anything you're saying.
No, I hear that. I think it'd be pretty easy for one or two people to go off and do that and figure it out, if you really want to. I mean, I'd love to have the students go off and figure out the issues behind it. I mean, I'd rather spend the time on Fundamental 2 and Fundamental 3. If I'm going to study anything, I want to know.
I'm not talking hours, I'm talking, you know, half-hour questions.
That's another thing we can do. I mean, if there are one or two of you who want to go as representative of the board, and we can, you know, get you set up, Aaron's already made contact, and that's another way to do that.
Yeah. And you can bring the data back to the board and say, here's what we heard. I think we should pursue it. If it's not worth pursuing, then it ends there, and we haven't taken up stuff and 5 or 6 board members, 7 board members.
I'm happy to do it. I don't know that I'm the right person to do it because I think that I've got the minority view here on sitting on the board. So I don't know that my opinion. Well, I know, but I don't know that anything that I do bring back is going to be seen with the whole. I wouldn't want someone who thinks opposite of kind of the larger group. I think someone with the larger group, I mean, I'm happy to participate in it, but I think someone else with the differing view needs to participate in it also. I'm happy to spend the time to do that.
I'm not
not be, pro it, not because of, actually, even if we have a 5% chance of winning and we get 10,000, and it's something I believe that's part of our role, I would do it. But I just fundamentally, unfortunately, don't think it's the board's role to be part of these lawsuits. And I wish that we would funnel our concerns to other entities. And that's just it. And so just getting more information won't change kind of that stance. And that's all I think. But I totally agree with all the argument of
But
this.
this is how corporations and the country, this is how change happens, unfortunately, because it's by class actions. It's how these policies and
so if there's
change.
one as an individual that I can sign on, or I might work in the community in other roles, I would totally be on it. It's just not my role as a board director.
Should we send it out to the community and
Well,
we represent the community?
We've got the next one, talking about WASDA priorities. Is it a priority you want to put on there?
I'm just saying, I don't think we know enough about this. I think that the arguments against it and for it we're speculating. And I think to make a decision this big that could have such a big impact is irresponsible to make based on speculation. That's all I'm saying. If we learn more and everything that you've said, the experts who are involved in it agree with, I don't have any problem voting no.
I think my best suggestion would be is that one or two people go out and get.
And I'm saying I'm happy to do it, but I think that it needs to be someone else as well.
Would anybody
Needs to
else
step
like
up
to
and
join?
take a half hour to ask these questions.
Would anybody else like to join? A student could join as well.
Oh, sure.
Ava?
Okay, yeah.
How
No, I
about
would
that?
love to join.
Is that okay?
I think that's a cop out, but okay. No, I mean, I think, thank you. I think I would love to have students take the
I
lead.
think this is a great discussion for students.
No, it is a great discussion for students, but we were elected to represent the community. If you're stepping out, then step out. But if you're gonna stay in, step in. This is a huge thing that could have an impact on our community, and to just be making decisions without even, we don't know enough right now.
I do think it's an interesting, separate from whether or not the board decides to take part in this lawsuit. I do think that the topic of social media is really interesting, since your theme for the year is belonging, because social media is like a place of belonging for people in some respects, like if they're able to find like-minded people. But then there's also the whole comparing yourself to other people and feeling excluded because your friends all went to a party and you didn't even know about it, kind of thing. So I'll be interested to hear as you go on through the year.
Eva, I would be privileged to work with you, and we'll set something up.
And you would change my mind, Ava. So, cheers.
That's exactly my point, David. Thank you for making my point for me. That's why I think it needs to be a broad view.
Much better than me being in that. I would much more listen to Ava than I would to my own opinion. I'm sorry. Okay. Should we move on to E, board priorities, legislative priorities for WASDA General Assembly? Thank you for doing this work, Deborah. The Word document you sent out to us up front to be able to talk about this was great. How would you like to step through this?
I think we should just go through them one by one. If discuss the ones I marked in yellow, I know that someone might have an interest in discussing others, so we go through, and if someone wants to discuss something that's in green, that's totally fine. I hope people spent a little time looking at especially the ones in yellow. And I got a little bit more information on one of them as well that is in green. So I think the one that will have the biggest impact on our district is number one, the weighted votes. And I think I'm pretty opposed to this. I think that the way that our structure with the weighted voting is right now is not great. But I think going to a one district, I don't think that's the solution either. It's a little frustrating to me. I think there's different ways to do this, and I don't think General Assembly is going to have some motion to modify it. I think that someone would have to come back next year with a different proposal, but I would absolutely support us voting against this. I guarantee you it will not pass, because there'll be a weighted vote on it and it won't pass. But for Seattle to have 19 votes and we have 2 votes, You know, I understand the small districts dislike. I mean, whether we go to having a smaller, you know, whether it's everyone has 1 to 5, like a smaller number so that there can't be such an overpowering view, or that 10 districts need to vote or support a weighted vote in order for it to happen. That means it's not just the top 5 that can outvote. We tend to benefit from the weighted votes because we tend to be more aligned with the east side districts that are bigger. But I don't think this is the solution to that. I think there is one, but I think they should establish a work group to come up with a fair solution. It's from Dr. Earl and I were talking yesterday, you know, it's kind of like, it's Congress versus the Senate.
Yeah.
And and equal representation, and there's pros and cons to both of them. So I don't think this is something that we should support as it's written.
I, for once, or maybe not once, but I completely agree with you. And I have a hard time at 755, and I don't want to jump forward, but it ties in with regionalization, which occurs a couple times, that I find particularly problematic, and it links in to the way.
We're on the way to votes.
Okay, but I have we can get to it, but just in the next 20 minutes,
Missing
I'd
something
like.
too. We're at a board meeting.
Okay,
Does anyone disagree with opposing number 1?
No.
Okay. Stop me, we'll go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh wait, hang on, Fred, which is the one that, the TK?
That is, I will pull it up here.
I have notes on that, but I just can't remember. 1 sec.
25 is the first one I wanted to discuss.
Okay.
Kinder. 28, I believe, is where it first shows up.
Okay.
Transition to
Okay.
That's the first one. That's
So you
only a
said-
name change.
Okay, is 25 the next, yellow?
I think 20.
25 is the next yellow.
Okay. Was there something before that you wanted to talk about?
Not for me personally.
Okay, so the issue I had with 25 is, again, I think it's going too far, too fast. And then because it goes, the regionalization, they take it from no greater than, right now, 6% in neighboring districts down to 2% in neighboring districts. The other part of it that I have a big problem with is align regionalization with rebase committee recommendations. The K-12 Basic Education Compensation Advisory Committee, WASDA doesn't have representation on that committee. I was looking at the members, and WASA's on it, WASBO's on it, other organizations are on it. I don't even think WEA is on it. I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but I don't know why we would just go and support recommendations of an organization or of a group that we don't even have a voice on. I also think that I agree the regionalization issue needs to be looked at, but I think that the recommendation that that committee is making is detrimental to us. So while I get where they're going, we need to have a voice on that committee, and I don't agree with us like having a policy that we align with that committee.
Yes, I mean, this is something that going back 2 years ago when I was a candidate, I focused quite intensely on regionalization. It's something you're aware, back in November, we drafted a resolution preserving the regionalization rate. I think sort of historically, something City Council also endorsed. And David and I met with Chris Reichdahl. The two of us met with Tana Sen and Lisa Wellman, saying that any reduction in regionalization would harm our district by over $9 million for 4 years, and that it wasn't justified by the report of the committee, which I read in its entirety, 25 or 26 pages. I've also reviewed all the minutes from the committee. I think it's very problematic, and I think it's deeper than just a particular resolution, because it's been endorsed by WASDA, it was proposed by SQUIM School District. There's also one that distinctly calls it out.
All of these
in 29, proposed by SQUIM, endorsed by WASDA. So WASDA, in my view, has now taken a side when it comes to how funding is allocated, not the size of the funding, but how funding is allocated amongst districts.
It hasn't been endorsed by WASDA, it's been endorsed
Okay,
by
by the
either the
committee.
legislative committee or the resolutions committee.
Okay, yeah, by the legislative committee, but it's troubling. And I think the other one that I'd flag is also any redefinition of the poverty rate that is going to.
We're
Okay, but they're all funding, it's.
So Dan, you gotta, come on, that's not fair.
It's-
We're on, I know you wanna go to the football game, I've
It's
got
not
a
the
kids
football game,
event.
it's I have to pick up.
Okay, I've got a kids event I wanna go to too, but are we gonna have the discussion right, or we're not gonna have it?
Oh, okay,
So
they're
does
linked.
anyone else
Okay.
feel differently about the regionalization? What the committee recommended was that we go, right now it's 0, 6, 12, 18, we're at 18. Most of our neighboring districts are at 18, if not 12. The committee recommended that it goes from 10 to 18. So bump people up 10%, but where the cost of living is the highest, nothing. So, again, it's because, I don't think it's a good proposal at all. I don't think it reflects the cost of living issues, the reasons why regionalization was put into place in the first place. I don't think everyone's out to get us. I think that we need to have a voice on the committee and that this is not a good solution.
I think we agree, yeah.
Sure.
Go on to the next one.
But I need to know some of the whys because we have these discussions, right? As part of General Assembly.
We don't know.
No, I know, but there are people that present their views.
Well, I think looking through the.
I'll vote no because that's what I'm being told to do. I don't have a problem with that.
So I think the report of the committee didn't justify any readjustment of the regionalization because there was no evidence that cost of living in those districts that would benefit, that it's gone up proportionally to us. And then when it looked at the Labor and Bureau of Statistics data, it showed in fact like 150% difference between a district such as Yakima and ourselves. But that's not reflected in the regionalization rate. So I think, the simple answer is it's adjustment isn't supported by the evidence that the committee put forth.
So what I would want to make a point if I spoke during this discussion is that we should not be aligning ourselves with a committee recommendation that we don't have a voice in. I think it's huge.
And we kind of discussed this last year as well, right? So, yeah.
Okay. Well, okay.
I think the letter from
Losing
a year ago,
regionalization
like
is
from 3 pages, it's fact dense. I think it puts forth our argument pretty well.
I think this one, along with the one that's gonna come up later too, is they're blanketing the regionalization with the rebase committee recommendations. You just did, you had asked us to, do a extra study on our demographics because things are changing quickly. We're redoing the long-range facility plan right now because things are doing quickly. So I think another piece that I see is just using one report in a blanket way applied a year and a half later doesn't necessarily make sense either.
Right. You said, Dan, 29?
Well, 30 is sort of it gets to the same issue, which is the second bite at the apple. And then also 31 would likely have a very detrimental impact.
So I'm sorry, it wasn't 29. So 30 I put down for discussion. So it's 30 is the same arguments as 25. Anyone have any different opinion? Okay. The 31, well, you can say what your issue is.
Yeah,
I have a different interpretation.
So, I think if you start, we'd have to see, but if you start changing the definition of the federal poverty rate, there are certain districts where that will proportionally increase, like Seattle, North Shore, would be my guess, some other districts. Mercer Island, even if you raise it fairly high, I don't think would benefit. So again, if it's about how you're dividing up the pie, that would see us as a net loser.
So, but I hear what you're saying, but this is federal level. So this is nationwide poverty level. we are compared, we have the same percent poverty level as they do in Arkansas. And I bet that our cost of living is a little bit higher. So there's very few people in Washington State that qualify for under the federal poverty level, where there's people living in the same types of conditions in their communities in many other states. So that's the issue here. I don't think, and my understanding, I know one of the people who proposed this, and so we've had discussions on this in the past. I don't know that it's written well. I hear you, and I think it should be explained a little bit better, but my understanding is that the intent would be to bring more federal dollars to Washington State to recognize our high cost of living. It's not taking anything away from the higher income levels. It's basically Title I dollars and free and reduced lunch and how you qualify for those things. And just because, one community gets more people to qualify, we might or might not see any more people qualify, and we might see a couple because if a number changes. So it's not gonna have a huge impact on us, but it will have a huge impact on our region. And I think that the more dollars that come into Washington State from the federal government only helps all of us.
But then I hear that, but I guess the question is like, how much do we have in state funding and allocation that's tied to the federal, right? And then I guess more globally, my concern is I understand that in poor districts, you need additional supports and programs. And I believe that there is a moral obligation to support that. But that's quite different than just giving additional funding to certain districts. Like what
Reichtel did with the ESSER dollars. You're right. I think we can all agree that was pretty inequitable. That's a good point.
Well, that was the federal expectation. We didn't even get a choice on that at the states in terms of that.
I thought Reichtel said he's giving it to the districts based on those.
Title I, but that was a federal mandate. Only on the state dollars did he have decision, but the bulk of the dollars were federal, and the federal government set that.
And that would actually help us. We'd get more dollars to Washington State, which is our kids' future colleagues. And because this federal poverty level is so low that and our cost of living is so high, there's very few people that qualify for that in King County.
I get it. I think the federal government disperses the money on their calculations.
Right.
We disperse it on our calculations.
No, but this is recommending that the federal dollars be regional rather than, based on regional numbers rather than federal numbers.
So we're trying to advocate at the federal level to change, but still, I guess
I think
trying to bring more dollars
what I can
here.
see is take the federal dollars and then instead of using the federal threshold,
Yes.
to use a state threshold.
Yes.
And then it would maybe be able to, ultimately we want to go get a lot more money in this area. But do we want to base it off of our Washington State standard or use the federal metric? And I think that's what this is.
I think that's what it is too. And so.
That wouldn't hurt us.
It would hurt us.
No, it wouldn't hurt us. It would help other people.
Yeah.
It would help other districts in the state.
I would like to hear
Because
how it-
more kids in the state would qualify for assistance than are currently qualifying.
We're gonna advocate the federal level to change the definition of poverty versus.
No.
Then it's the state, like the federal government gives the money based on their calculations, right? Well,
It's a bad statement because we can't even figure out what it's called.
That's true.
Okay, so I was hoping to just get guidance on if there was clarification about what it meant to be able to have a position, but I agree that it is not written well enough to be able to support it. To me, the idea is that it helps more kids.
Agreeing to.
Right. No,
Right.
I'm not opposed to it. I think if there's clarification, or reword, I don't know if we can revise the wording at all,
So
on
the
this-
intention
on the
is to
fly,
help
but-
more kids.
Right.
It's not taking
No, I
away
get
from
that.
anyone,
I get
it's
that.
helping.
It's, my understanding, I'm reading this as that WASDA would, if everybody votes to support this, then WASDA would support legislation efforts to allow using to allow federal, rules about who's considered below the poverty line to be based on a regional,
Yes.
set of numbers rather than the national average, which we're a very, very, high cost of living part of the country. So I support that. I just think this is really poorly written. So if it's clear that that's what it is,
Right.
I think nobody here is opposing that, right?
Is that, okay.
If that's really what it is, if it's some kind of
Okay.
weird, fast
I got it.
news,
I got
we're
it.
gonna reinterpret what we're doing with federal dollars, we're not on board with
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I guess my, concern is, to 25 and 29 or 25 and 30, we see now, and I think really, for me, the legislative priority is making sure regionalization, which would have a huge impact for any adjustment, if it passes in 2 weeks, then, and WASDA says that the recommendation, the official position of WASDA is that the recommendation of the compensation committee be adopted with respect to regionalization. I think it's a totally different ballgame with respect to our involvement and role in the way in which we see WASDA.
I don't see them passing because of weighted votes right now.
I guess we'll see.
So I don't think the sky has fallen yet, but, and I was a little bit surprised with some of the districts that, oh no, it was the weighted votes, it's not on the regionalization. So I don't see it passing, just like I said, based on weighted votes. So we can have that discussion if we need to.
Can we really quickly talk about number 39 that you also flagged for discussion?
Is that the TK? Is that
Student
the
civil
one?
rights, sorry, number 9,
Oh.
we skipped over, it's my bad, it's number 9, that's the TK.
Okay, let's do 39, because we're down here. I believe in this. I think that, I don't like how this is written at all. I don't think that I frankly think it's just much too political. I'm guessing that this came from mass communities. I don't know that anyone would ever be advocating to violate civil rights, but I don't think this is well written if that's what their intention is, but I couldn't figure out what their intention was.
Yeah, and I think that, I actually thought it was probably about LGBTQ stuff and trans kids being able to be called by their name and so forth. I don't, if you have a right in Washington State under Washington State law, then you have that right. So I feel like this is kind of performative and unnecessary.
And the other question is, what about searches and all those type of things and privacy? How do those even basic discipline issues fit into this?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so that's a no, at least as written, maybe not the idea of it, but the way it's written. Okay, and then back to number 9 is the transition to kindergarten. So this is actually Representative Sen's bill. It passed on the last day of session. It was a big to-do, so when I called her yesterday, I'm like, talk to me about this because I don't understand. She said it passed, it's not gonna come up again because it was such a big fight. And we don't have it, so it really, I would recommend abstaining or voting no at this point based on the information that I got. Because it passed last session, there's emergency rules that are currently being written, and that it's about, because transitional kindergarten is not part of K through 12 that we get funding for, that we're responsible for. We're not responsible for pre-K, though our preschool program is kind of different. So this is the reason they changed it, the wording from transitional kindergarten to transition to kindergarten, so that it became a verb instead of a noun. So that it was, I know, I still don't totally understand it, but based on our legislator who, does this, she said it's somewhat irrelevant anyways, because it just passed and there's already a work group that's gonna create the rules around this. And again, we don't have TK, so it doesn't impact our district.
Yeah. All her lead.
Okay, so abstain or no? It doesn't really
Abstain.
matter. Okay. And then just wanna confirm that, the do not passes all seemed, most of them related to the diversity statement that was passed last year, and then 1 or 2 of them just seemed, I don't know, it was they were proposed by like the same idea. They just felt weird to me.
Okay,
Good? All right.
yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
And then what we can do is the priority list, once WASDA has its priorities, I don't think that we totally agree with all of them, but we can take a look and add the levy issue and then maybe add the head count issue also to the levy. It would be part of the levy. So we can kind of do that next and then decide our priorities.
Thank you.
I have a hard stop at 7:55, but carpool duty, so,
Thank you, Dan. Okay, let's move on to consent agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as posted.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, students?
Aye.
Directors?
Aye.
That's 1040 passage for the consent agenda. Superintendent announcements.
I made all the announcements there, earlier in the meeting.
And ledge report.
Nothing else.
And any board member announcements, Tam?
No, not yet. Meetings are starting.
Just
Yeah, well, I did attend the PTA Council Diversity meeting, and that was great. I think the PTA is working on belonging and a sense of Islander pride, and how do we reinvigorate that, and how do we enable a sense of belonging for parents and students alike. And they've got a head person in charge, and they're going to see how it progresses, and I think more information will be coming out from that, so I thought that was lovely. And that's all my announcements. If there's any other business for us? If not, how about a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor, students?
Aye.
And directors?
Aye.
It's 1040 to adjourn at 7:56. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you to our audience as well. Glad you were able to participate. Cheers.